Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back. And I'm so sorry for the late start, but it really wasn't my issue. Apparently, our streaming software provider had some kind of issue. And I apologize to the X viewers. There's no X stream. I got some kind of a message like extremely high traffic. We're working to create more resources. Please wait uh, several minutes and then try to start your stream again. This is the exact issue we had with our previous streaming software provider that caused us to leave because I don't know if you guys remember, but I would go to start the stream and the stream just wouldn't start. And so, these cloud-based softwares, they take money from clients and they just fail miserably at providing the service that you're paying for. I'm really going to look into some more alternatives. But that's the first time I've ever seen this problem from what we use now, which is called StreamYard. So I apologize for that. But greetings and salutations and welcome. I, for a long time, have said that there is a extreme shortage of criticism or research and exposing of one Robert Lazar, commonly called Bob Lazar, who claimed he worked on alien spaceships at Area 51. And I'm fond of Stanton Friedman saying, you could buy the book, but not from me. From time to time, Bob Lazar pops back up in popularity due to some less than ethical, completely immoral scumbag who decides to sell a documentary about him. But, it's not a coincidence that they leave all of the information about Bob Lazar being a fake scientist out of their documentaries about Bob Lazar's, both his wives being, convicted criminals. One of them was a murderer. They just leave these things out. Like, oh, his whole education was fake. Well, let's not put that in the documentary. Oh, he's not a real scientist. Let's not put that in the documentary. It won't sell if we say he's just some nutbag saying this stuff. We got to say he's a senior staff level physicist. And that's another lie. Bob Lazar lied about his work history at Los Alamos, claiming he was a senior staff level physicist. But then people got to his former coworkers, even former supervisors, who confirmed that he was never a scientist at Los Alamos. He was never a physicist. He was indeed a low-level electronics technician, the kind of guy who would get you a keyboard replacement if you spilled coffee on it while working in the lab. He was not a scientist, is not now, nor was he ever a scientist. Yet these people sell their documentaries based on former government scientists. Oh, that's another lie. He cannot now, nor could he ever prove that he actually worked for the government. Full stop. So there are some incredible deep dive documents that we haven't really talked about here or gone through, or maybe we have in bits. The two most important documents, and by the way, I apologize, I forgot to link the other one, but I will put it in the description of this video or podcast after the broadcast ends. So there's two very important documents about Bob Lazar that go through his history of lying and fabrications and changing his story. A big hallmark of the Bob Lazar supporters are his story never changed, but actually it changes all the time if you're paying attention. For example, in his original telling of seeing the test flight of the alien flying saucer he worked on, he said it rose above the desert floor, moved to the left, moved to the right, and then set back down. He never mentioned that it was high enough that he could stand underneath it. And then when he looked up, the craft disappeared by using gravity waves to wrap light around the craft, and he just saw the sky above. And then when he walked back from under it, it reappeared in his line of vision. This is a new addition. Other new additions include, that the government got this flying saucer alien spaceship from an archaeological site, but one on the ocean floor, not a regular archaeo. That's a recent addition. In fact, with every major retelling of the Bob Lazar story, the story changes or little additions get added into it. Also, in his original telling of the story, there wasn't this discussion of light absorption inside the craft, or how the craft, they had these huge halogen lamps inside it and you still couldn't see inside the craft but a few feet from the actual light source. and this is confirmed by our 3D model of bullshittery. No, this is another new edition. And the story keeps changing, evolving, as does all mythology. But back to these very important documents. Two very important documents prove that Bob Lazar's story is completely and totally fake and fictional. And that would be Michael Schratt's The Bob Lazar Report. And that's what we're going to focus on tonight. There is an additional document by alien scientist Jeremy Rise, a man with a real physics degree, that essentially says Bob Lazar's story is his science doesn't work. Jeremy has a group that is very interested in, let's just say, strange science and anti-gravity and propulsion systems. They invited Bob Lazar to speak at their conference and tell them all about the alien propulsion system, would never take them up on it. There have been a multitude of times where Bob Lazar was invited to speak to real scientists where he ran like a bitch. He was supposed to sit down with Stanton Friedman, who was a real nuclear physicist who actually worked on secret government projects, I believe, surrounding nuclear rockets and propulsion systems. And that can be verified about Stanton Friedman. His education can be verified. He tried to sit down with Bob and talk to him on multiple occasions, and in every occasion, Bob Lazar made some excuse and couldn't sit with a real scientist. There's a reason for that, because a real physicist can see through a fake one. So he will never sit with a real physicist, in my opinion. Before we begin on the actual document, which, by the way, is linked in the description of this video or podcast, I did find an interesting sort of, it's been called a lost interview of Bob Lazar from 1997, almost 10 years after his initial claims were made. So in order to make this broadcast not very dry, otherwise I'd just be reading a PDF file for 2 hours, we're going to start with that. We'll do about half of it. Then we'll go to Michael Schratt's excellent document that debunks Bob Lazar, which, by the way, if you want a copy of it, it's in the description of this video or podcast. And it should really be noted that Michael Schratt, look, I love Michael Schratt. I think he's a great guy. He's just a good person. And, you know, one of the good guys in UFOs. And there's so few of them. But Michael Schratt believes a lot of wacky shit. Even he doesn't believe Bob Lazar after doing the research on him. And that says something when somebody who really is a sort of a true believer totally discounts Bob as a hoaxer and a fraud and a, you know, just a complete phony. That says an awful lot. So we are going to, I'm solo IQ tonight. Okay. Yeah. If you say so, right? There's always some haters. People are saying, I'm going to be busy for a month with new UFO White House binders. No, I doubt it. I don't think they're going to release anything spectacular. Yeah, Big Mac Orange says, it pisses me off because I really wanted to believe his story. Well, so did I. And I've said this multiple times. I'll say it one more time. If I could pick one story out of all of UFO mythology to be real and to be, you know, to be a real story, I would either pick Roswell or I would pick Bob Lazar. It's a very close, I don't know which one. If I had to narrow it down to one, probably I would pick Bob Lazar's story because it verifies so much of the UFO mythology. So this is an interesting interview. We're going to begin here. I want to take a moment to welcome in the live chat. I apologize to the X live chat. I don't know what happened. StreamYard just was like, nope, not doing X2. So we are going to do the best that we can. Roll with the punches, as they say. So let me take a moment to check in with the Kick chat as well. For those unaware, we're really trying to expand our Kick channel. It's kick.com/Truth Seeker Show. One Truth Seeker and then the word show, all one word. We want to thank Luther Rebel, who just sent a full send. Thank you for that. 100 kicks. And please go over to our Kick channel and follow us over there. If you do, I'll give you a big shout out during the live broadcast, and a thank you, like a shout out and thank you for Tenzin53, and a shout out and thank you who just followed us, and a shout out and thank you for Not Henry TV who just resubscribed, and we've got Dark Side Cuckening just followed our YouTube channel. Thank you for your kindness and for helping us expand our reach on kick.com. So let's get into this video. And then, like I said, we're going to try to get through the entire Michael Schratt, Bob Lazar report, something I've never done here before, but I think that there's two documents that are very, very important. It's Michael Schratt's and then the one from Jeremy Rye's Alien Scientists. I doubt we'll get through both of them, but we'll see how fast we can get through it.
Bob, for the benefit of our viewers, someone out there that doesn't know who you are, tell us who you are. Give us your credentials and where you've worked.
Okay, so the interview has just started. We're going to see how long does it take Bob Lazar to start lying. We're 5 seconds into the interview.
Well, I'm a physicist.
Oh, there we go. 5 seconds into the interview, Bob Lazar is already lying. He's not a physicist. He has no physics degree. He has no physics background. He has no physics work history. He's written no physics papers. He's not published any physics papers. Nobody can find any of his so-called master's theses on either electronics or on physics. 5 seconds into the interview and Bob Lazar is already lying. I think that's a bad sign that this guy's a liar. Couldn't he wait it? I guess not.
And a scientist. I've worked
and a scientist. So 7 seconds into the interview, he lied a second time. We're up to 2 lies so far.
Government institutions, one of them being Los Alamos National Labs in Los Alamos, New Mexico. And also I'm more prominently known for working at Area S4, which is about 15 miles south of Area 51 in the Nevada desert, which is a top secret government research facility.
Yeah, he did work at Los Alamos, but he worked at Los Alamos as a subcontractor. He didn't work directly for the lab. And he was a low-level electronics technician, the kind of guy who would bring you a new keyboard if you spill coffee on it. He had nothing to do with the physics work or experiments being done at Los Alamos. Full stop.
Where did you go to school, Bob?
I went to school at MIT and Caltech.
Okay, we are, I don't know, 30 seconds into the interview. Count the lies. He lied about being a physicist. He lied about being a scientist. He kind of lied about working at Los Alamos because he said that he worked at Los Alamos as a senior staff level physicist. Didn't say it here, but said it in previous interviews. So that's a lie. Why wouldn't you tell the truth? I was a low-level electronics technician at Los Alamos. And now we're up to, and he didn't go to Caltech. That's 4 lies. And he didn't go to MIT. We can verify that. 30 seconds into an interview, and Bob Lazar has lied a full 5 times already. This is not looking good for Bob Lazar.
Also a couple other.
By the way, these are facts. He verifiably lied 5 times within the first 30 seconds of an interview.
Junior colleges here and there in California.
And what was your field of study?
Field of study was physics and electronics technology.
No, he took one electronics course at Pierce Junior College. He never actually completed any actual real college courses, even a bachelor's of science level. So we'll add 2 more lies. We're up to 7 lies, 40 seconds into the interview.
And when you were working for these different installations before you went to S4, you didn't have any connection with flying saucers whatsoever, did you?
No, I didn't have any connection. And in fact, I didn't even believe in him. I thought it was just...
we're going to add 8. He did have a connection to flying saucers because he helped his friend Gene Huff do a real estate appraisal with John Lear's house. And in exchange for doing that real estate appraisal, John Lear made copies of all his UFO VHS tapes and photos of UFOs and articles about UFOs and gave them to Gene Huff. And right before Bob Lazar came out with his story, he sat around with Gene Huff watching all of John Lear's material. He was also friends with John Lear, who a year or 2 before Bob came out with his story was on a television show with George Knapp exclaiming that there was flying saucers, 11 of them, in fact, at Area 51. Bob, I guess, would trim that down to 9 when he came out with his story. To say he had no connection to UFOs, being good friends with John Lear, that all right, so what are we up to? 8 lies now? 50 seconds into the interview. He's lied 8 times in less than a minute, friends. Not looking good for liar Lazar.
The rantings and ramblings of crazy people, more or less.
When was the first time that you actually began to believe or got interested in the subject enough to want to go someplace and maybe work with them?
Well, I was never interested in the subject at all, primarily because I didn't believe in it. It's when I was offered a job working on advanced propulsion systems is how it was advertised to me. And it was only later.
And by the way, EG&G has publicly stated that Bob Lazar has never worked for them. He claimed that he got the job through EG&G Special Projects.
But I found out the job.
So are we up to 9 lies in a minute and 30 seconds into the interview? Maybe 9 lies. 9 lies already, Bob Liar Lazar.
I was employed to do.
By the way, I just want to remind everybody we're a viewer-supported show. I'll be monitoring the Kick chat and the YouTube chat and everywhere else. So we call out every bit of support. If you send a super chat, we read every single one. Super sticker, we thank you. Become a member. Give some memberships. We will recognize and support all of you kind and generous benefactors. We want to take a moment to thank Blacklight24, who just followed us on Kick. Thank you for giving us a follow. Let's get some followers on Kick, if nothing else tonight, my friends.
Was to back engineer extraterrestrial craft, or an extraterrestrial craft. And it really happened backwards from the normal chain of events.
How did you come to get the job at the S4 area?
Well, that's a good question. And I really don't know if I can answer it. I don't know what motivated them. There are certainly more intelligent, more educated people around.
Yeah, somehow they couldn't find a real scientist, so they hired a bankrupt fake scientist with fake degrees. And let's be clear, he has 3 fake degrees because he claimed he went to Caltech and got a master's. He claimed he went to MIT and got a master's. He claimed that he had an undergraduate or a bachelor's degree from Pacifica University. Right after he claimed that he had a degree from Pacifica University, they got busted for being a degree mill. What is that? It's a place that just sells fake degrees. So he's got 3 fake degrees. His first wife was a convicted murderer. His second wife was convicted or wanted, at least, for some kind of bank fraud situation. He just declared bankruptcy, and somehow the government said, sure, let's let him into the most secret place on earth during the height of the Cold War. I call bullshit.
There's a wide variety of high-profile scientists and physicists that they could have pulled out of the works anywhere. If anything, your guess is as good as mine on that. I really don't know why I was chosen. I did have not really connections per se, but I did know a couple people that were also involved in the project. I really didn't know they were at the time, but they could have put a name in. And
sure, people are like, I got a fake scientist friend. He can help you work on those alien spacecraft. I want to address this one. Soprano fan says, it doesn't seem at all that it would be worth it to fabricate his entire story, look like a crazy person, and be shunned by society just for an insignificantly small amount of money. Do you know how much money he made from the Tester's model deal alone? Do you know how much money he made from his book deal? It was enough that he bought a $1 million property right after the book came out. And remember, he sold VHS tapes in the back of science magazines for years and years and years. I know because I was one of the victims of that as a child. I think it was $29.95 plus shipping. My father had to give me a check. I had to give the cash to my father. And also, Gene Huff and him tried for years. You can find articles online. They tried to get a Hollywood multi-million-dollar movie deal, and they almost did several times. There were several announcements that there was Bob Lazar Hollywood movie deal. So he made money at every chance that he got. And lately he's selling posters signed by him even. So you know, it wasn't an insignificant amount of money if he's buying $1 million home right after the book deal. And the book deal, by the way, came from Tom DeLonge and his sister's company, and they tried to hide that it was their company that was publishing the book. I believe Bob Lazar may have made millions of dollars. He claims that he doesn't. There's always been an argument, but every chance this guy got, he tried to cash in. He was given $10,000 just for a speaking fee on several different occasions that we could verify. So it wasn't an insignificant amount of money. But thank you for your comment, Sopranos fan. And we've got Just Some Guy is here with one for the goal. Yeah, everybody's asking me this. Is there any chance you can make a 5 to 15-minute video about Bob and all of the evidence? Something soundbite that can be shared instead of an hour plus live. Yeah, I'm working on that. And actually, what we're doing tonight is filming for what will end up being a 2-hour documentary. And when I'm done with that, from all of the evidence that we have gathered, putting it all, trying to cram it all into 2 hours, I will hit all of the big points in as short a video as I can. 20 minutes or less is what I'm going for. And I get that people want to, people just want the shortest version. A lot of people have TikTok brain though. And in my defense, it's really hard to cram 35 years of this guy lying to the public for cash into 15 minutes. But I'm going to do my best to try to do it. But thank you, Just Some Guy. And we have Matthias with one for the goal. Lazar also lies about not making money from his story. Yeah, as we've detailed here, he's made money every chance that he could. He's cashed in on this story. But thank you for your kindness, generosity, and support, Matthias. And let's continue.
You know, it could have wound up that way.
You think that Dr. Teller might have had anything to do with it?
It's a substantial possibility. At one time, while I was working at Los Alamos, I went to...
and you see this mug, Area 51, been there, done that. He sold those on his website for a time.
See one of his lectures. I got there early, and he was outside, and coincidentally, at that particular time, I was on the front page of the newspaper he was reading, and he was reading about an article about a small Honda...
Yeah, this is Bob's story about Edward Teller, the founder of the hydrogen bomb. So impressed with Bob's jet car that he offered to get him a job. Teller never, for whatever reason, Teller wouldn't talk about Bob Lazar. I think he thought the whole story was nonsense. He could have cleared this up by, denouncing Bob's claims. He never did.
The Civic that I had converted to run on jet power. And I introduced myself and explained what I was doing. And some years later, I had sent a resume to him and some other national labs when I decided to get back into the scientific field after I had moved to Las Vegas. And, it is substantially possible that he had a hand in it.
That's another lie. He decided to get back into the scientific field. He was never in the scientific field. He was in the electronics tech field. But we thank Charles McDonald for one for the goal. That look on Lazar's face is duper's delight. That is correct. That is exactly what it's called. And thank you for your kindness, generosity, and support of the show. Big supporter Charles McDonald is back, dropping donos. I'm glad to see him. Welcome, Charles McDonald. Good to see you.
He did refer me to someone at EG&G, which in turn did lead to the employment at S4.
When did you actually see the first vehicle or ship or craft that you knew for sure wasn't of this manufacturer on this planet?
Well, I did see it probably the second or third time I went out to the facility.
And remember, he claims that he's been to the facility 6 times. 6 times, that's all, before you ratted on the most secret project on Earth. Okay.
And at that time, I wasn't convinced that's what the craft was. When I first saw it, I thought that this was a US-made, very advanced next-generation fighter, and in fact, that this would explain all the UFO sightings.
It's interesting. If you listen to a lot of Bob Lazar's interviews, it's like he has specific talking points, and he hits each of the talking points. And there's never any pushback when anybody interviews him about any of the talking points.
It was only later, to find out that that wasn't the case when I started receiving some documentation on the craft and actually got to go in it and found out what the scope of the project was. But I had seen it earlier on, but really didn't know what I was looking at.
And what was the scope of the project? What were you supposed to do to this craft?
Well, the scope of the group.
Exactly. Yeah. His W-2 is fake. It's just like his science degrees.
Take apart and discover the manufacturing process and materials used to produce this.
He could have been. A lot of people have theorized that he was a disinformation campaign to scare the Russians into thinking that we had alien high-tech stuff.
We dealt with the power and propulsion system of the craft, and we were to back engineer that. We were to see if the power and propulsion system could be duplicated, and if it could possibly be duplicated with earthly materials instead of any exotic foreign materials that we might have come across.
Well, I think it's an awfully big coincidence that his book comes out and then he buys $1 million property. The property he was at before that, significantly less valuable. But yeah, I mean, I'm open to the possibility. Until Bob Lazar is willing to show us his W-2s, I've challenged that. Show us your W-2s from 1989 till today. Show us all your tax returns. Let's see how much money you've made from the story. There was a deal with Bob Bigelow, billionaire aerospace guy, to start a company. And then Bob Lazar burned him because the billionaire figured out that element 15 wasn't real and that Bob was just using the facility that he got him to store his junk in. So, anything is possible, though. I still think that he's made more money than he's let on. I can tell you with 100% certainty that at least twice that I can verify he was given a $10,000 fee to speak somewhere.
When you saw that craft, and
one speech, 10 grand.
Was an alien craft. Did that upset you in any way, that knowing that here was a vehicle from another system sitting right here on the planet Earth, and of course always believing that there was no such thing. It was
horses are real expensive, man. I've always wanted a horse, but when I found out what it costs, I'll just go, rent one, just go horseback riding.
It was gone now, and you had to take a whole new look at things.
Well, actually,
that's how I am,
question.
Tim
A lot
Houston,
of people have said, boy, that must have been exciting. And, that really
Here's another talking point. It was ominous.
The feeling really came over me when I was permitted in the craft to see the placement of the subsystems that we were going to be working on. And it was not a feeling of excitement at all. It was a very ominous feeling, a feeling, like I said before, that
he looks like his illegitimate child.
It's very hard to relay, but it was a real overwhelming, odd feeling that I had.
Yeah.
Without trying to use a pun, it was a very unearthly atmosphere, and as it should be, because none of the materials were familiar, none of the architecture of the device was familiar, and it was very odd.
Yeah, because obviously they were here, and
no, I think you're talking about a different case, Paul Benowitz case, not Lazar.
Of such a situation, which brings me to this question: how far in the future do you estimate that craft was to what we're doing at the present time?
Well, I've heard other people estimate things like that, saying, well, it's
that's a good point.
Or 10,000 years in advanced of our
Mendinopolis has a good point.
I don't really find that to be the case.
Why wouldn't they design them all like that to avoid
really find
satellites and stuff?
Probably a technology it's about 100 or 200 years in advance of us. And the only reason being is because they stumbled upon a device, a machine that can actually make gravity, that can produce gravitational waves. Now, this is something that our science and physics knows. We know what gravity is. We know how it works, but we really just observe it. We don't understand it.
Do we really know what it is?
We certainly don't have a machine that can create a gravitational wave. And because they've developed this, they have a unique propulsion system, and that has a lot of offshoot possibilities.
I'll say it's so unique. Nobody else on the entire planet of Earth has ever seen a propulsion system like the one Bob described.
And other uses. Also, the power source is fairly unique. We know of its existence. There is a
I'll put
total
some comments up
annihilation
on the screen.
reaction we know of. The
So
three
be
atomic
nice with your
reactions we know of are
comments. I'm
fission, as you see in
trusting
a
you guys sharing
atomic
your
bomb,
comments on
fusion, as you
screen.
see in a hydrogen bomb, and we're currently trying to make a fusion reactor to provide power cleanly. And we also know there's a total annihilation reaction, which is a extremely, virtually 100% efficient reaction that we're really haven't even begun to do any research with. But here are these systems in place operating, and it really didn't look that far in advance, of what we were.
It wasn't. It was only 100 or 200 years ahead of us, but nobody that worked on it had any idea how it worked. You can't. Both of those things can't be right. But thank you, Tales of the Sonic Voyage, who's a big show supporter and a YouTube channel member with one for the gold. The trench coat smoking dogs are actually guarding the Element 115. Free the pimp. Yes. For those unaware, the guy who came out with this story came out with a whole lot of stories, including smoking dog men at Skinwalker Ranch and werewolves and other just ridiculous tales of nonsense. But thank you, Tales of the Sonic Voyage. One for the gold. Thank you for your kindness, generosity, and big support. Let's hit a goal tonight for once, friends. It's the last show of the week, I believe. I may be going to the cabin early this week.
Well, one interesting thing that
God knows I need some cabin time.
The vehicle was very small in relationship to the power it produced, was it not?
Oh, it was tremendously tiny. You're looking at something that puts out more power than an average nuclear power plant. And if anyone lives near one of those, you know how big those things are. And we're looking at something, scarcely bigger than a basketball that's doing this.
Incredible. Do you think that these beings pose any threat to the human race?
I don't think so. And again, that's speculation. I really wouldn't know anything about that. But if the intent was to do harm,
are they good aliens
from all
or evil aliens, Bob Lazar?
Like, the Earth has been visited for thousands of years. And if there was any intent to do harm, it would have already been done. If anything, now this is just my personal speculation, I think we're more of a Disneyland, an interesting thing to observe. But I don't believe there's any real direct.
I guess we're going to go through half of this, and then we'll get to the document and some more deeper research, and then we'll come back to it.
Interaction. There may be, but I don't see any evidence of it.
Why doesn't the government just come clean on all of this? Because there's so much speculation on it. There's so much disinformation out there. Why don't they just come forward and say, this is what's going on? They don't pose any threat, and it's just something you're just going to have to live up to, people.
Well, it's difficult to do that. First of all, if they were going to come completely clean, they're going to have to admit that as far back as 50 years ago, they knew this was going on. And in the meantime, they've been spreading disinformation and lies.
How does he know? He doesn't even know where they got the craft or when.
Occurred. So
well, now he's saying he knows where they got the craft.
50 years. So to start with, there's a problem.
He doesn't know when they got it. He claims they got it decades ago.
Said, well,
but he has no evidence for that.
And here's what we found out. It because these systems are advanced and they pose a real unique function, they present a substantial weapon potential. And because of that, all the information is certainly not going to be released. However, I've always wondered why at least the existence of the craft, at least a statement to the effect of, we have found some material, we have some information, a lot of it pertains to national security. However, we can verify the existence of life elsewhere other than Earth and technology that we have, and perhaps release a little bit of information here, but they're not even doing that. And on that note, there might be several reasons that we haven't thought of a lot. Who knows what beliefs that it might interfere with?
Oh yeah, give the religious argument. It'll be an ontological shock to religious people to learn that there's intelligent life on other planets, and it'll collapse society. No, I think people could handle it.
But it's a scary.
Even in 1989, I think people could have handled it.
We thought, we've pretty much put ourselves in the center of the entire universe, that we're the, most superior race, and it might upset people to find out that we're really not that significant.
Well, with that thought in mind, do you think perhaps maybe that the aliens themselves may be saying, look, it's better if you just kind of keep it quiet and let us just go on about observing your little Disneyland, and you think that might be part of it too?
It could certainly be part of it. It could be the architecture of the whole plan might have been laid down by them. Who knows what kind of communication, if any, that we've had. But again, your guess is as good as mine on that.
How many different types of the craft did you see? Just one, or were there other styles?
Well, there was one craft that I worked on. That craft was a very sleek,
Again,
thin-looking
rehearsed
craft
talking
compared to the
points.
other ones that were there. There were nine craft. I nicknamed this one the sport model because it was a very sleek-looking 50s style flying saucer looking thing, and the name pretty much stuck and people were using that name. I really don't know much about the other crafts other than the fact that whether it was accidentally or just a coincidence that I happened to see them one time. All the hangar doors were open at one particular time when I was there, and normally they were closed, but for the most part
Isn't this a problem of the story? If you were working someplace where there was 9 alien flying saucers, wouldn't you try to get a look at every one of them? 9 alien spacecraft, and you're just going to look down the hall. Oh yeah, there's a Jello mold looking one, and there's the top hat looking one. Yeah, I'm not going to even try to see the rest of them. I don't know. I would think your curiosity would get the better of you, and you would do everything you could in your power to see them, each of them. Kino Tech USA with one for the goal. Lazar has always had a wormy vibe about him. I can't disagree with that. I think he just comes off like a slimy con artist, fake scientist, convicted pimp to me anyway. By this time, he was a convicted pimp by the time of this interview, by the way, convicted for running a whorehouse.
The only information I have is on the craft that I particularly worked on.
So you don't have any idea whether the other craft came from different systems or they were all from the same system? You have no idea about that?
Well, I do know for a fact that the power and propulsion system in all the crafts were the same. Oh. So that either says,
Does he know that, or was he told that? Because he didn't see the inside of anything but one craft.
Now you have to start speculating that, number one, they either all come from the same manufacturer, or number two, someone is subbing out parts. And, your mind can run away on this somewhere because you see, obviously, a vehicle like this is produced. Well, there must be a factory somewhere. And, eventually, your mind just runs off with you and you have to draw a line somewhere.
Of course. It may be the day that we will buy the reactor and the system and the components from this big galactic company that has the exclusive on it. Who knows? Maybe there's some sort of a patent on this thing. Right?
It's possible, but to me, it's so hard to believe, and I know that's strange coming from me.
His craft is bullshipping.
I kind of draw a line between
Bob Lazar going to have to smack a bitch.
And the social structure, and
all pimps got to be willing to smack a bitch. You got to keep them bitches in line, selling their
hands-on
coochies,
experience with, because your mind can really run away with you, and who knows what's going on. You'll find yourself standing outside, staring at the sky, wondering why no one's going to talk to you. And so
I don't think he said chainsaw, but he did say they just cut open a working reactor. I don't know any scientist that would be stupid enough to do that, but okay, yeah, another plot hole.
That you worked on fly or operate.
Yeah, I did on one occasion close up, and on several occasions from about 10 miles away. On the one particular occasion, there was a test flight going on. They came and got me to witness a short duration flight, and I stood at the door of the hangar, and the craft lifted off the ground, which was an amazing sight in itself, something about 52 feet in diameter, virtually silently lift off the ground and just move around a bit and set back down. But, that was the close range operation I got to saw.
Can humans duplicate that vehicle?
At the time I was there, that was not even in the realm of possibility.
How about?
Notice he mentioned a test flight, no mention of standing under it and it disappearing.
There was a test pilot flying.
That's a later addition.
So apparently we had developed the expertise, at least to lift the thing off the ground and move it around. As far as taking it any great distance or taking it out of the atmosphere,
bullshit from the true believers.
This is a prized possession,
sure,
an operating extraterrestrial craft, and things change when you leave the atmosphere. Things like the fact there's no air outside, the fact that there's not exactly 100% chance you can bring it back now. So I don't think they're flying around to Jupiter and taking looks at planets. I think they're very careful with it. They're just testing it. And,
no comments about people's religions, disparaging comments about different groups. Got to be respectful in the live
all
chat,
stops
guys.
should be pointed
Most of
out
you
to
are.
try to
Thank you for
demonstrate
that.
this, because this seems to me like the ultimate vehicle to move around, especially in our own solar system.
Well, yeah, you hit on 2 points there. It is the
Yeah,
ultimate vehicle
another
to move
plot
around,
hole.
and imagine being able to go anywhere instantaneously. Now, without any weapon potential at all, consider that being a weapon potential. We have trouble in the Middle East. You know how long it takes us to get aircraft
A lot of
carriers out
Christians
there.
do
Well, we'll
believe
be out there in a
it's
couple of
diabolic,
weeks. I mean, it takes lots of planes refueling. If we could be out there in a
diabolic
snap of a finger and
illusions.
load
That's what
something
people are
up
seeing.
like this with tanks and
Demonic
weapons,
illusions
you know,
of
that's a,
aliens.
you know, or behind enemy lines instead of advancing in front of them. I mean, this is a tremendous
Yeah,
weapon.
body language
And it's
experts are
because
full
of
of
that,
shit.
I
Big
think,
white men.
where we see a
That's
lot
not
of
a
the
real
secrecy
science.
stemming
That's
from.
just invented nonsense.
So they're kind of torn between pulling out all the stops to move ahead on development.
I'm sure
and
other
putting all the
body
stops in to
language
find
experts
stop
that he
anyone from
did
finding
show
out what's
signs
going
of
on.
deception.
So
So it depends on who you
they're
listen
really
to,
between
I
a rock and a
suppose.
hard place. Well, it can.
Yeah, could be. No, I would never hit a woman.
Just exactly how fast is the craft?
I once had a woman punch me in the face with a
You know
closed
how
fist, and
fast
I didn't hit her
Schratt
back.
might
I
do
grabbed her
it?
though to stop her from hitting
Well,
me.
it's
Trying to hit me a
because
second
of the
time.
way that the craft operates. It's kind of a.
Yeah,
Your
Bob
question
found the
really
owner's
doesn't make
manual to
sense
the craft in
because
the glove box. Sure.
It's a gravitational propelled device. And we know
Sure, yeah, a whole
gravity
pimp
bends
outfit, I
time
bet you.
and bends space, distorts time and distorts space.
Yeah, he's had
When
decades
you
of
move
experience
in
lying.
a linear mode, you travel X distance in so much time, which is what determines your velocity. However,
Well,
if
he
you're
didn't start
distorting
that until
time
years
and
later
distorting the
after his
distance,
story.
the equation no longer makes sense.
His main income was selling
It's
tapes
nonsense.
about
So
this bullshit
essentially,
for
because of
years
the
before he
gravitational
started that
propulsion of the
company. You
device,
can
you
look it
can
up,
move
Sopranos
at
fan.
tremendous distances almost
And
instantaneously.
by the way, his
Did
company is not making huge amounts of money. I can't imagine he's making huge amounts of money selling science toys, glow in the dark paint, and shit like that. So, you know,
you ever figure out, or did they tell you where this craft came from what system or whereabouts?
pay
Well, there was
attention.
documentation that they had, but you know, it was something that I couldn't verify. I knew what I was working on because I got to analyze it and develop theories about it.
Okay, so he's just asked, was there any indication of where the craft came from?
But as far as information from other people, I don't know if the information's correct, but I assume most of it was. If in fact it was, they claim that the craft came from the Zeta Reticuli star system. It's a star system called the Net, I believe. That's
Oh, but no mention of an archaeological dig where they got the craft. This is 1997. The story about the craft coming from an archaeological dig in the ocean is a recent addition to his story, expanding the mythology and lore.
visible only in the
No mention of it in 1989, no mention of that in 1997 here, no mention of that in the 2000s, just recently. On Joe Rogan, he said the craft came from an archaeological dig site.
southern hemisphere, so don't bother.
But how do you have an archaeological dig site on the bottom of the ocean? I'm not even sure.
Here in the United States, but it's about 32 light years away, which is a tremendous distance considering that even if you were moving at the speed of light, it would take you 32 years to get there and 32
Pimp my
years to get
spaceship
back,
ride,
which, of
yes.
course, a speed we can't even attain now.
Of course, this
Winter Soldier just said a hell yeah on Kick. Thank you for that.
Well, it must, and because of the assumption that number one, it's small. Number two, there's
John
no
in the
storage for
red
things such as food.
Z06 just
Doesn't
followed our
appear to
Kick
be in a
channel. Thank you
waste
for that.
area. Doesn't even it doesn't appear to hold
Let's
any
get some
cargo,
Kick
so
support. Let's get some
wherever
Kick
it
subs
came from,
and
it
some
came from there
gifted
really
subs.
fast, you know, that's why another reason I called it the sport model. It has no luggage space.
kind of like a dragster.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think Rock's wrong about that. Show
It's
me
got
the
one
corporate
specific function to
filings.
get from one place to the other as fast as
He had a
possible, and
company to
that's what
sell
this-
the tapes first.
Sounds good.
I know that for a fact.
When were you taking off this project, or did you just quit the project, or did the project get completed?
Now we're into a long story. I never specifically quit.
Yeah, his story defines his entire existence
A
and
problem
life. Yes.
formed, and I don't know if you want to go into a long dissertation here, but it
Stormcrow
was.
over in the Kick chat, slumming it.
I really don't know how to explain it.
A problem formed from you took some people out to see the craft flying.
Well, I had taken some people out there, but that wasn't where the problem had stemmed from. The problem was before that, because of all the time I was keeping this quiet from my family and friends, everything. a lot of times I had to leave during the night. At the time, my wife obviously thought that I
Luther
was
Rebel
well
just
known.
sent 2 hypes,
You know, I
10
had
kicks
given
each.
permission
Thank you
to
for
a
that.
lot of the
Luther
security
Rebel.
clearances to monitor my telephone,
There's some
my
kick
mail,
support.
everything. I gave written permission for that. And as months went by, my wife started having an affair. Now, they were monitoring this and knew about
And
it.
here's the
but I
reason
didn't.
that he
And
gets
because they
thrown
saw
off the
potential for
project,
an
not for
emotional
blabbing about the
instability,
test
they didn't
flights
want anyone.
or doing
They
news
wanted
interviews about
they
it.
wanted the situation to resolve itself. So they stopped me from coming out to work. Some time went by, and then I began to get a little concerned that now I have all this information. They don't want me coming out there anymore. And this is when I started to bring a couple friends out to show them what was going on in case something actually happened to me. And then we got caught going out there. So it was just a terrible chain of events that occurred, and eventually I just wound up not going there.
70227.
Hello? I'm in the middle of an interview. Bye.
Yeah. You're interrupting me selling my fake story.
Yeah. The craft is about 52 feet in diameter and about 16 feet high. Originally, some years ago when I came out, I had the dimensions wrong. I thought it was about 30 feet in diameter, and because I'm really not good at judging distances closely.
A physicist is not good at judging distances and makes a 20-foot mistake in estimating the size of an object that's right in front of him.
However, I worked with some of the model people from the Tester Corporation, and they had some artists come out, and what we did is we took dimensions of things that I knew that were close up, and they scaled them back and essentially reconstructed the
Yes, he's given 3 or 4 different explanations for how big the craft was since 1989.
Entire craft that way, and the dimensions and everything matched. So I think the final ones came out to about 52.8 feet in diameter and 16 or 15.2 feet high, something along those lines.
Tell us a little bit about the craft itself inside, where you.
Yeah, but he won't release that information.
How, just kind
He's
of
never even been
basic
asked in an interview how much he's made on
there's
this story.
3 levels to the craft. There's the central
Every
level.
chance he got, he tried to cash in.
The hatch lets you
model
into.
deals,
This is where
documentary deals, speaking fee deals, book deals. But if you want to believe he didn't make much money on this, you go ahead.
Gravity amplifiers that provides the power.
He's not buying $1 million properties selling fucking glow in the dark paint with his bullshit
the actual
company.
Waveguide antennas, horns, whatever you want to call them, that actually emit the gravity wave. They hang down in a triad at the bottom level of the craft, and they are movable. The very top part of the craft.
Yeah, that is true. You got to do a lot of mental gymnastics to believe Bob.
Now, I don't know
listen,
exactly what's
who
on
cares
that
if he,
level,
let's say he never made a dime off of the story, but other people did. Did you know that Jeremy Corbell bought $1 million property right after his documentary about Bob Lazar dropped? And he claimed that he worked for his parents as basically a janitor for properties that they owned. How are you buying $1 million property working as a janitor at properties that your parents own, like an apartment house? I don't think that makes sense. So the evidence is out there that a lot of people made money on the story, but let's say he never made any money on the story. It still doesn't change the fact that he keeps getting caught lying constantly. He's lied about his education. He lied about his work history. He lied about working at Los Alamos as a senior staff level physicist. I just think, the perfect example is this interview. 30 seconds in, and he already lied 5 or 6 times that we can verify. 30 seconds into an interview, he lied 5 or 6 times. Why believe anything else that he says for the rest of the interview? And we have detailed the financial fraud. Maybe we'll make a separate section, not fraud, the financial motive that he has had. $10,000 to talk for a few hours at one UFO thing. That's pretty good money. Reportedly, in the news, he got paid I don't know what it was, a substantial advance on his book.
I firmly believe that that's the navigational system, and those porthole type devices are actually sensors that determine the craft's orientation.
And by the way, the talking point that Bob never made any money on his story. That comes from the assholes that are selling you the story, the people who have been lying to you for years and years and years. We know he made money selling the tape. Bob Lazar, excerpts from the government Bible. It was in the back of science magazines. We know that he formed the whole company to sell that VHS tape, and he lived off of that for years and years and years after he came out with his story, having no other income. We know he got a substantial sum of money to be in several documentary projects after he came out with his story. He got paid big bucks for those. We know he's been given, at least twice, been given $10,000 to do a UFO event or convention. He did one in Sweden, of all places, for the anniversary of his story with George Knapp. We know that he got paid a substantial sum of money for a book deal. We know also that he made money selling merchandise related to his story. We know that he got a substantial sum of money from Tester's Model Corporation. Michael Schratt verified that with John Andrews, who worked for Tester's Model Corporation. So the talking point that Bob never made any money from his story, it completely and totally falls apart under actual scrutiny. But people are free to believe what they want, I suppose. And, you just have to ignore all the evidence that, yes, he indeed tried to cash in every chance he got.
In space. So it can tell whether it's from star fixes or landmarks or who knows what, or a system that we're not familiar with. But that's how the craft determines its orientation and position in space.
How about the construction of the?
Yeah, I don't know how much money because he won't release that.
Was it bolted together?
I can ask,
together,
but if he won't answer,
it was together. Well, it was fascinating that there were no seams, no visible seams that I was able to see. There were no fastening devices, rivet screws. Everything had the appearance of being injection molded.
The person doing the interview is a race car driver.
Different systems.
What is he doing interviewing Bob Lazar? I don't even know.
Smooth and connected, like you'd see in a giant.
Yeah, they lied about the FBI raid on his property too. It had nothing to do with UFOs
really
or aliens. That was discernible. He was selling thallium, and somebody murdered their wife allegedly with thallium purchased from Bob Lazar's company, which can be poisonous.
There would be some really fine dragsters we could build with some of that kind of
stuff. That's for sure.
Bob, judging from the size of the craft, the height of each level, the size.
Yeah, we can detect gravity waves, LIGO, but we've never detected gravity waves within Earth's atmosphere. Funny that.
Judging from the seat and judging.
He said it worked on
height of the steel.
Gravity waves. All right, we're about halfway through this now. Troll with one for the goal. He was the guy they asked to figure out how to use the UFO lavatory. Yeah, they weren't sure how you shit on the spaceship, so they brought in Bob Lazar. I guess they figured a bullshitter was good expert to figure out where to shit on the fake flying saucer that he claimed that he worked on, right? Yeah, the fact that he even scammed Bigelow out of a 3-month advance really illustrates the lack of discernment Bigelow has for all his UFO-related side hustles. I totally and completely agree with you. And we've got Tosca2 just followed the channel. Winter Soldier sent 10 kicks. Boy, we've got a tough kick crowd. We used to get people dropping dono bombs, people buying 10 subs, gifted subs. But we're thankful for any of the kick support. It must be that I think a lot of people bought a lot of kicks and now they're down to like they don't have a lot left. In any case, we probably do better than Dark Side Phil does. So maybe I should just be thankful for that, right? All right, and now, my friends, we will go to if I could find it. Where the hell did it go? Okay, we're going to go to the document. Very, very important document that's often overlooked. And look, this came out May 4th, 2015 originally. I think there's been some additions and updates to it. However, these documents were available at the time that both these documentary filmmakers made their documentary. Guess how much of the evidence that Bob Lazar is a liar and a scammer made it into either of those documentaries from this document that was available before they made their documentaries. And by the way, This document is well known in UFO circles. They know that all this information is out there. They purposefully leave it all out of their documentaries. That, my friends, shows a deceptive nature of the people selling Bob Lazar's story. If they give you all the information, most rational, reasonable people will walk away going, fake scientist, fake degrees, fake education, fake work history, fake claims of being a scientist. His story is probably fake. But if you leave all that out and you just hype him up as a former government scientist, then more people will believe the story. More people will buy your documentary. And here we have Free Bob Lazar. Here he is with one of his rocket car projects. By the way, people have argued with me. Oh, well, he built rocket cars. He must be a scientist. No, people can build jet cars, rocket cars, all kinds of shit. It doesn't make him a scientist. I've built huge model rockets, people-sized model rockets. That doesn't make me a scientist. It makes me a science fan and tinkerer. And here is John Andrews, who worked with Bob Lazar to design the famous Testers Corporation Bob Lazar S4 flying saucer model, which I was also a victim of. So here comes the dry part of it. We're going to try. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bounce back and forth between reading through this and talking about it and jumping back to the live chat for some comments and questions. So this is from Michael Schratt. The analysis of claims made by Bob Lazar, as outlined in this white paper report, are based on his multiple TV and radio appearances over the past 25 years. Additional relevant information consisting of correspondences, letters, and paperwork contained within the John Andrews collection, donated to Michael Schratt during November of 2013, was also considered. The conclusions reached in this report are strictly those of the author. John Andrews was the former director of Testers Model Corporation Special Projects Group in San Diego, California. A brilliant plastic model kit designer and engineer, John's model kits include the Lockheed U-2 spy plane, SR-71 Blackbird, MiG-37B Soviet stealth fighter, SR-75 penetrator, XR-7 Thunder Dart, Roswell UFO, F-117 stealth fighter, YF-22, and Area S-4 UFO. Mr. Andrews developed vast connections throughout the entire aerospace industry and maintained contact with both Kelly Johnson and Ben Rich at the Lockheed Skunk Works. Every effort has been made to present the raw evidence as is from the collection with a neutral, non-biased approach. According to Bob Lazar, between December of 1988 and April of 1989, he was employed by the United States Department of Naval Intelligence to reverse engineer the propulsion systems of an extraterrestrial craft at a top-secret facility known as Area S4, located approximately 12 miles south of Groom Lake. And there's Michael Schratt's email. All that glitters isn't necessarily gold. Massachusetts Institute of Technology and Caltech, nothing but crickets. Nothing but crickets. No degrees or master's thesis can be found on Bob Lazar at either location. Bob Lazar states that he has a master's degree from MIT in physics and also a master's degree in electronics technology from the California Institute of Technology. However, there's no record of Bob Lazar ever having attended either location. Bob Lazar has never produced his degrees from either MIT or Caltech, which would help to verify his educational background. And here John Andrews wrote a letter trying to secure Bob Lazar's magnetohydrodynamics master's thesis. And they couldn't find it. So imagine that. Yeah. So people have looked for his master's thesis. Nobody can find them. Bob Lazar never produced a copy of his master's thesis on magnetohydrodynamics, MHD, from either MIT or Caltech. All efforts to track down Bob Lazar's master's thesis, if it ever existed, from MIT have failed. How is this possible if he really did attend MIT? And again, we're having this story retconned again, because now Bob is saying, well, I wasn't there just as a regular student at MIT. I was there to work on a top secret project. Well, that's not what you originally said. You originally said you had a master's degree from MIT. Now you're saying, now his story changed. Now he was working on secret weapons projects that were top secret. Sure. And here's John Andrews trying to get a copy of Robert Scott Lazar's thesis on MHD in our facility. Our librarian suggests you try the MIT physics department. Dr. Isaac Sadovnik, a graduate of MIT, suggests you try the Aero and Astro Library at MIT. And by the way, John Andrews tried those, couldn't find it there either. So this is a letter from John Andrews to Robert Kessler. More evidence to support the assessment that there is no master's thesis on MHD at MIT from a Mr. Robert Scott Lazar. No yearbooks from either MIT or Caltech during the early 1980s show any listing for Robert Scott Lazar, despite his statement indicating he achieved his degree from MIT in 1982. So there's no mention of Bob Lazar in any of the yearbooks of that era. And believe it or not, both Stanton Friedman and Michael Schratt went to MIT and got the yearbooks, checked through them. No mention of Lazar. So the retarded people who say, well, the government erased his degrees to discredit him because he was telling us the truth about those aliens. The men in black would have to go to hundreds and hundreds of people's homes, steal out the yearbook, erase any mention of Bob Lazar, fake new yearbooks, age them so they're age appropriate to 1989, sneak back into people's dusty attics or garages and put the yearbooks all back in all of the students from that era's homes to erase Bob Lazar being at MIT or Caltech. It's a ridiculous argument from ridiculous people. Lazar claims that his professor at MIT was named Hosefield. In addition, Lazar claims that his professor at Caltech was named Duxler. Records indicate there never was a Dr. Hosefield who taught at MIT. Furthermore, Professor Duxler never taught at Caltech, but did teach at Pierce Junior College, which was confirmed by Stanton Friedman. So, yeah, once Bob Lazar was asked to name some of his professors, he named a guy who never taught at MIT, who turned out to be, I believe, one of his high school teachers, and Professor Duxler, who turned out to be a guy who taught at Pierce Junior College, the only college we can verify that Lazar attended. He did one course in electronics technology at Pierce Junior College. If Lazar really did attend MIT, why go to Pierce Junior College in the first place? Lazar claims he earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Physics and Electronics Technology in 1978 from Pacifica University. Later that same year, Pacifica University was shut down by the state of California for selling degrees. Yes, they just sold you a fake degree. You could hang it on your wall and fool your stupid friends with it. That's a degree that Lazar claimed that he had, even in court filings. It was from what's called a degree mill. It's not a real degree. According to Stanton Friedman, Lazar graduated in the bottom 1/3, 26 out of 369 students of his high school. Certainly not good enough to be accepted into either MIT or Caltech. If Bob Lazar was living in California during 1980, how did he commute all the way to Massachusetts to obtain his master's degree from MIT? Since Lazar's story broke in 1989, Bob's parents, Albert M. Lazar and Phyllis Lazar, have never come forward to substantiate any of his claims of having worked at Area S4. In fact, in 1985, Bob borrowed $15,000 from his father and only repaid $1,000 of it back. And here's Bob Lazar's fake W-2. We know it's a fake W-2, and look at that. Bob Lazar went out to Area 51, according to him, some 6 times. And he was a senior staff level physicist for that project. And somehow his pay was only $958.11 for the whole year. Okay. Additionally, the employer's name is listed as United States Department of Naval Intelligence. That does not exist. That's not a real government agency. The employer's identification number doesn't exist. Not a real agency. Also, the Social Security number that he listed on his W-2, which I believe has been redacted, didn't belong to Bob Lazar. It belonged to some woman that lived in New York City. Why would you put a fake Social Security number on a W-2 that you're trying to use to claim this is proof that I work there? You wouldn't. According to Bob's W-2 for 1989, he was only paid a total of $958.11. What could Bob have possibly learned about such a historic project from only working there for a few days? Researcher Norio Hayakawa did an in-depth analysis of the Social Security number on Bob Lazar's W-2 and found out it actually belonged to a woman from New York City. In addition, Lazar never provided any paycheck stubs that could help verify his claims. Note the OMB near the top center of the W-2, which stands for Office of Management and Budget. When dealing with official government forms, nothing is supposed to appear to the right of the OMB number, especially not the fictitious E6722MAJ. According to Bob's W-2 form from 1989, he was paid by the United States Department of Naval Intelligence. However, there is no such organization. There is, however, an Office of Naval Intelligence. How do you explain this discrepancy? I think this discrepancy is easily an amateur faking a W-2 might make that mistake and call it the Department of Naval Intelligence instead of the Office of Naval Intelligence. But a real government agency giving you a W-2 would not fake that, would not make that mistake. According to Bob Lazar, he worked at S4 from December 1988 to April 1989. If this is true, where is the missing W-2 for wages earned during 1988 from the United States Department of Naval Intelligence? And then we get to the briefing claims. He claims he was given a bunch of briefings when he first got there. Blue briefing folders as described by Bob Lazar. Bob Lazar claims that while at S4, he read through portions of over 120 blue briefing folders to help him get up to speed on the program. This material, according to Lazar, contained actual alien autopsy photos and mentioned that the United States government had determined that the aliens originated from the fourth planet out from the Zeta Reticuli 2, part of the binary reticulum star system. Lazar also claims that these folders contained potentially earth-shattering information regarding the origins of humans. He specifically mentions that the folders indicated that mankind was the end result of, quote, 65 genetic alterations, unquote, which were allegedly performed by alien intervention. Of course, if this information were true, it could have potentially disastrous religious implications. What was the source of material contained in the blue folders? If the United States Navy was involved in the program, as alleged by Lazar, were U.S. naval secretaries and admirals briefed on the program over the years? And here again is a letter from the Department of Navy that just basically confirms that the number given on the W-2 is not correct. Letter to John Andrews from Captain R.A. Jones, U.S. Navy, dated March 18, 1991, indicating that there is no government organization known as the United States Department of Naval Intelligence, as Lazar claims. And here we get into Area 51. Map of the Nevada test site showing Area 51 at the upper right. Site S4. S4 is actually off the chart into the upper left of the Tonopah test range, indicated by the arrow. Area 4 is located within the immediate vicinity of Yucca Flats atomic testing area and at least 6 miles west of Lazar's S4. Note the perimeter of Dreamland airspace, which cuts Papoose Lake in half. If a saucer somehow accidentally wandered away heading south during a test flight, it would no longer be within the jurisdiction of Area 51 restricted airspace. So that's another hole in the story. If there really was test flights, if it wandered just a little bit south, it would go off of the test range. Site 4 is actually a radar installation located in Tonopah, Nevada, 70 miles northwest of Area 51 and not south of Groom Lake, as Lazar claimed. Maps of the Nevada test site clearly indicate that there is an Area 4, but it is located at least 6 miles west of Papoose Lake, which is located off the chart and to the right. How do we explain this discrepancy? Also note that each of the tiny dots in the chart which indicate the location of an atomic test. Obviously, Area 4, Area 2, Area 7, and Area 9 would be highly contaminated with radiation, hardly the place for a secret space base. And see all those dots on the map? Those are atomic tests. So Bob Lazar is claiming, yeah, it's Area 4. It's off of Area 51. Well, that area is pretty irradiated. It'd be a pretty stupid place to take to put a secret base. People would be getting cancer left and right working at that base, but don't let things like facts and evidence get in the way of a good fake alien story that you too can sell. One moment here. We'll get caught up with the live chat. One moment here. We've got Lucas Bachman. Famous driver Garlitz, I believe. Yeah, that's who was doing the interview. I believe he befriended Lazar over rocket cars. Yes, that is the case. And thank you for pointing that out. And thank you for your kindness, generosity, and big support of the show. Much appreciated. And let me check in with the Kick chat. Luther Rebel sent a hype and another hype and a 50 skull emoji and a 50 skull emoji and a full send at 100. Thank you, Luther Rebel, for your kindness, generosity, and support. Slowly cranking up the Kick support for tonight, my friends. Thank you for your kindness, generosity, and support, Kick viewers and friends and supporters. And yeah, let's try to continue. And I apologize if I appear to be racing through this, but it's very data rich and it's a little dry just sitting here and reading this. And I'll try to get through some of it. And again, the PDF file is in the description of this video or podcast, so you can read this as at your leisure as well and keep it for reference for yourself. Bob mentioned that he witnessed a test flight of the sport model at Papoose Lake. And that an engineer was in radio communication with the craft. If the craft generated its own gravity field and warps the fabric of space-time around it, how is radio communications possible? In the world of highly advanced aircraft flight testing, there are always support aircraft which fly chase in case of emergencies. This also includes helicopters, which could be rapidly expedited in case of an accident. Such aircraft are standard procedure during test and evaluation flights. Lazar never mentioned anything about emergency vehicles or medical assistance at Area S4. What if the sport model suffers a malfunction and crashes? The nearest help would be from Area 51, which is approximately 12 miles away. That would mean the response time would be at least 20 minutes. Far too late to provide any useful medical assistance to American test pilots involved in any accident. In addition, Lazar never said anything about rapid response hazmat personnel who might be called upon if there was a breach in the antimatter reactor during a crash. What would the security implications be if such an event occurs? Does the fire department Area 51 have majestic clearance? More holes in the story. According to Bob Lazar, he did in fact witness one short test flight of the sport model which took off from Papoose Lake. If this were true, wouldn't the highly contaminated radioactive plutonium and depleted uranium dust from previous above-ground nuclear bomb tests cover the bottom of the craft? This, of course, would mean that when the craft was brought back into the hangar, the entire area would be contaminated with radioactive fallout. In addition, Lazar claims that the test flight had to be briefly postponed due to a dust devil which was passing across the dry lake bed. This clearly indicates that radioactive dust particles could have been caught between the slats of the multi-segmented hangar bay doors, which rolled up as they were opened. In early interviews of Bob Lazar conducted in the 1990s, he stated that during the one and only test flight he witnessed, he could clearly see the craft lift off the dry lake bed, move from left to right, and then land back on Papoose Lake. He also stated that the sun was in his eyes while he was watching the flight, and that the sun was behind the craft. In a recent 2015 interview, Lazar claims that when the craft flew directly overhead, it became invisible and he could no longer see it. Lazar never mentioned anything about the craft flying over him in early interviews, and he certainly never claimed that the craft became invisible. How do we explain this apparent discrepancy? Well, I explain it by the story gets grander as time goes on. Interior cutaway illustration of the Lazar sport model by Michael Schratt depicting the childlike seats, control consoles, gravity amplifiers, antimatter reactor, and waveguide. And by the way, the mention of any sort of control consoles is gone now. When they just did this latest documentary, there's no controls at all. Well, in early descriptions, Bob Lazar mentioned control surfaces in front of the seats. Now there's no control surfaces. So that part changed as well. And this is a very good point. Radioactive dose badges. these record how much radiation you're taking in. It's very common for people at Area 51 to wear these dose badges. According to Lazar, Area S4 is located approximately 6 miles east of the Yucca Flat atomic bomb test site. Then it would be logical to assume that anyone working at the facility would be issued dose badges as a precautionary measure against being exposed to potentially hazardous radiation. However, Lazar specifically stated that nobody at S4 was ever issued dose badges. Enlargement of the interior section depicting tiny chairs, again, control consoles, and antimatter reactor, which were all located on the main deck. The so-called gravity amplifiers are located on the lower floor. If the waveguide connects directly to the top of the reactor, how do you remove the half-sphere dome to load the Elephant 115? Again, another problem with the plot. And here we are again, figure A and figure B showing control surfaces. Those are now gone. Those have been removed. Somebody just spent years recreating the flying saucer that Bob worked on in a 3D model. No control surfaces. Lazar also claims he only saw 2 seats on the main deck of the sport model, yet the tester's area S4 model shows 3. Apparently, 1 seat must have been removed, leaving nothing more than a stump, as Lazar described it. In addition, all available interviews with Lazar indicate that at least 1 control console was also removed from the main deck for the purposes of testing and evaluation. So figure B that depicts the main deck of the sport model as seen by Bob Lazar in December of 1988. Note the removal of the childlike seat and the control console. If, according to Lazar, everything on the interior of the craft looked like it was vacuum formed onto the floor, how were these 2 components actually removed? Was a chainsaw or a plasma cutter used? Would they really have damaged one of their most prized possession? In addition, would removing 1 control console have a direct effect on the operation of the other 2? According to Lazar, it was his assessment that the craft he saw during the test flight was manned by a human pilot. If this was true, would those in charge of the program allow American test pilots to fly a craft that was not in full working order? And here's the so-called antimatter reactor depicting the tuned tube, element 115, top cap, and dome cover. This is an illustration by Michael Schratt. There's the so-called power source. According to Lazar, there were no on-off switches anywhere on the antimatter reactor. He also claims that once you place the element 115 into the reactor, it instantaneously turns on. If this is true, how do you turn the reactor off? Or how do you place the half sphere back on? Yeah, if it repels everything with some kind of gravity waves, how do you even put the dome back on? Lazar claimed that everything within the interior of the sport model looked like it had been machined from wax, slowly heated, and then allowed to cool, forming a smooth blend radius at all of the corners. If this is true, why did the antimatter reactor have a sharp 90-degree angle on the base plate? And there we see another image of that. And here's the another illustration from Michael Schratt. He always does a great job drawing and sort of visualizing these. I'm sorry, but I'm just going to call them flying saucer fantasies. Would you really want to be within close proximity of a matter-antimatter reaction? Exactly who machined the element 115 into triangles at Los Alamos? If it was not from the Earth, they had 500 pounds of the material. Are we really expected to believe that they were unaware of what they were machining? Why did Bob Lazar allow the alleged sample of 115 to get away from him if he was going to use it in an effort to prove his claims? Whatever happened to the spent used element 115 triangles, which were utilized during bench tests of the reactor? If Lazar really did sign a 10-10 agreement in order to work at S4, why didn't he spend 10 years in jail? And why wasn't he fined $10,000 for divulging what was allegedly going on after leaving the facility? Another illustration of Bob Lazar's flying saucer, the so-called sport model, right? The so-called sport model. All right, so I'll take a few comments and questions, and we'll try to continue to get through this. And too many holes and questions with no answers from this man. Yeah, and Tim Houston, all those missing and dead scientists and military types make the government look bad. I don't know. Yes, it's only a model. That is correct. The McCaslin story looks very bad. Well, he has no proof of it, so it's just a story, you know. Just a story. That's what we get. We never get evidence. We never get proof. We get stories. According to Lazar, the sport model had the capability of generating its own gravitational field, which would essentially cancel out the effects of mass and inertia. If this is true, what's the point of having seats in the first place? There was certainly never any discussion by Lazar regarding seat belts in an alien craft. If American pilots were tasked with the assignment of test flying alien spacecraft at S4, referencing radio communications mentioned earlier in this report, are we to believe that they just laid on the floor of the craft? How would they know how to control the direction of the gravity amplifier, since no mention was made of Lazar that the craft was retrofitted for human pilots? How is Bob Lazar able to attain a small sample of element 115? Why has he not released a sample of element 115 for examination by the scientific community? Barry Castillo, Bob's buddy at S4, never came forward to corroborate Lazar's report. Here's some early scribblings by Bob Lazar depicting the sport model in the hangar bay. Why, after 25 years since Lazar claims to have worked at S4, have none of the security guards come forward to verify his account? Bob claims the door hatch on the sport model was removed and showed no signs of hinges. If this is true, how was it opened in the beginning? How was it sufficiently sealed closed to prevent decompression during interstellar spaceflight? More holes in the story. And he kind of tried to explain this magic honeycomb that just opened. And I don't get it. Lazar claimed that there was a small hatch measuring 16 inches square, which led to the lower level. This hatch utilized a unique collapsing honeycomb door, which could be opened with 2 fingers. He claimed that it was near the outer rim of the craft and that the area was extremely cramped due to sloping overhead arch of the upper ceiling. If this is true, that would place the hatch approximately 21 feet from the center of a craft, assuming it was 52 feet in diameter and the hatch was set 5 feet back from the rim. Now, if the gravity amplifiers were located 8 feet from the center of the craft, that leaves a distance of 13 feet from the gravity emitter for the hatch opening. In early interviews, Lazar stated he only looked through the doorway, or the so-called sport model. Later, he claimed that he actually crawled around on the bottom deck of the craft to examining the pivoting properties of the gravity amplifier. Why is there a discrepancy in details provided by Lazar? He also stated that he had to lean over and place his upper torso through the hatch near the outer rim of the craft to see the gravity amplifiers below. In other words, it was a tight fit, which he allegedly squeezed through this door to gain access to the lower level. Could Lazar have squeezed back through a 16-inch square cutout of the main deck if the door had a slope on it? And here we see the famous Area S4 scale model, which I am a victim of. I paid for that when I was a child. My dad was big into, he was a train guy. He was big into HO and Lionel trains. He filled our whole basement with shit, like in a big, huge train platform and things like that. But because of my father, I went to toy and hobby shops a lot. That's one of the things that got me into model rockets, because I wasn't interested in trains, but my dad was very supportive. So he'd say, you want to go to toy and hobby shop with me? And my brother would get usually like race car plastic models. I would get model rocket stuff. And my dad would buy train crap, right? It was fun times. But I specifically remember buying this. My father buying it for me. And then I was terrible at building models. So I actually had to get my brother, who was great at building models. He was about 3 years older than me, to help me. And I still have it in a box somewhere. I still have this thing in a box somewhere, but damn if I could find it. I try to find it when Bob Lazar started resurfacing again. I got a lot of boxes in my attic to go through. It's in there somewhere, friends, right? Yeah, interesting times. We'll take a moment to check in with the live chat. We have Luther Revel just sent a skull emoji and another full send. Oh, wait. He sent FF9000 sent a hype, and Luther Revel sent a hype, and Luther Revel sent a hype, and a skull emoji, and a skull emoji, and a full send. Thank you for the kick support. All right. We're going to try to. How are we doing on time here? Pretty decent. Okay. We're only at 20 of 49 pages. Come on, man. We're going to have to do a part 2. According to Lazar's original pencil sketch drawn around 1989, the hangar bays at Area S4 measured 40 feet across. This is a point that's very important. So he said the hangar bay doors were 40 feet across, but then he said that the craft was 52 feet across. How do you explain this discrepancy? Could a senior staff physicist really be off by 14 feet? And more importantly, how do you get a 52-foot diameter spacecraft through a 40-foot hangar bay door? This is really a problem. Why did Bob Lazar never actually see the sport model as it was being brought out of the hangar in preparation for a test flight? Because this story is fake? I don't know. And here's a height comparison. There's some problems. Bombshell, folks. I think we have another problem here. According to Lazar, the sport model measured 15 feet high, 16 feet if you go by the instruction sheet included with the tester's model above. That would put the outer rim at the midpoint of the craft 8 feet off the ground. So Schratt is arguing here that the apparent aliens that would fly this spacecraft were 3.5 to 4 feet tall. Yet the hatch to get in was 8 feet tall. And there's no mention of stairs or any method of crossing that distance. So Michael Schratt makes a very important point here. How does a 3.5 foot to 4 foot alien jump up and get in a spacecraft where the hatch is at 8 feet without help? Bob Lazar never mentioned any help. Bob Lazar never mentioned any steps. Do they just float up to the hatch? Another problem. And here, Schratt points out that normal aircraft, when the hatch is too high for people to just, from the ground reach it, there's a staircase. How did the aliens enter the craft if the bottom of the hatch was at least 3 feet over their heads? Lazar never mentioned the sport model was equipped with a ladder or air stair that could be extended to the ground during interstellar space flights. So another big problem. And here's a sport model drawn by Michael Schratt. Michael Schratt did a lot of great work, at least, trying to visualize Bob's story. And I'm sure Schratt originally believed him before he did all the research. Here's an original drawing by John Andrews, Mark Dickinson, of the sport model inside the supposed S4 facility. So he said he got a brief glimpse of the other 8 craft being stored. What was his exact viewing perspective? Were the other craft positioned further forward in the hangar bays, leaving a clear path? If not, then any details of the other craft would have been observed. Even if there was a clear path through all the connecting doorways, the black wall on the last hangar would have been a minimum of 360 feet away, making any detailed observation difficult at best. Hangar bays at S4 measured 40 feet across. See the pencil sketch. If this is true, how is it that the other craft Lazar claimed he saw at Area 50 S4 also fit neatly into the hangar bays? Did they all originate from the same reticulum star system? If the craft came from multiple extraterrestrial races, wouldn't there be many different sizes of craft, some exceeding 40 feet across? And this is some correspondence. This is a letter to Patricia French, who was Edgar Taylor's secretary, of people trying to verify Bob Lazar's story about about Edward Teller meeting him and getting a job that was never able to be verified. And here we have Bob was flown to Area 51 to begin his first day, which would include signing the papers of non-disclosure agreements for his job at S4. How could Bob Lazar have obtained a top secret Q clearance in only 8 days when it generally takes between 6 and 12 months to obtain such a clearance? Another hole in Bob Lazar's story. They're not going to give you a top secret clearance to work at Area 51 in 8 days. They have to do a complete and thorough background check, which, by the way, Bob Lazar would fail just based on his bankruptcy, which Bob Lazar would fail based on his wife being a convicted murderer with strong ties to organized crime. He would never be giving a security clearance even after 6 months, let alone getting it in 8 days. According to Lazar, he got a top secret clearance, which was 38 levels above Q, to work at S4. Top secret Q clearance generally takes between 6 to 12 months to obtain, far too long of a time span for Lazar to have interviewed for the S4 job at EG&G and starting work at S4 only 8 days later. So huge plot hole. When referring to security clearances, so he explains the security clearances. I'm not going to, I'm not going to bore you with that, but here's another interesting time that Bob Lazar refused to speak with actual aerospace people, refused to speak with actual physicists and aerospace engineers. Why did Bob fail to take up Jim Ragsdale, former spokesman for Lockheed's challenge to speak to a group of his peers comprised of physicists and aerospace engineers at the Aero Club of Southern California? Was Bob concerned that a seasoned veteran within the aerospace community might call him out regarding his claims associated with Element 115, the sport model, and interstellar space travel? Throughout almost all of his radio and TV interviews, Lazar stated that the sport model he saw looked like it had just come off the showroom floor. However, on page 3 of the Tester's Area S4 UFO model instruction sheet, Lazar states that the craft was showing signs of roughness due to human intervention, as he termed it. How do we resolve this apparent contradiction? Was this due to the fact that some components have been removed using crude cutting techniques, as described earlier, or multiple test flights? Yes, and this is another interesting plot hole. According to Los Alamos Monitor, June 9th, 1982, Dr. Edward Teller's lecture at Los Alamos at June 28th, 1982 was totally packed. How could Lazar have met with him prior to the lecture if it was so crowded? Again, according to the instruction sheet in the Tester's S4 model, congressmen attempting to visit the area are told they can't go because the area is radioactive. If this is actually true, then how could Lazar work at that facility without a radiation dose badge? Again, covered in this report. And here's more correspondence. John Andrews got a letter from Jim Ragsdale of Lockheed Martin, who issued a challenge. And Ben refers to Mr. Ben Rich, director of Lockheed Skunk Works. So, real aerospace engineers and physicists challenged him to talk to them about his claims. He would never do it. And here's another bombshell. Lazar claims that he worked at Area S4 from December of 1988 to April of 1989. He further stated he was only at the S4 facility a total of 6 times. According to Lazar, his first trip to Area 51 was spent signing security papers and taking an allergy test. He also claimed the first 2 days he was at S4, he did nothing but read blue briefing folders. Further, Lazar states on at least 2 occasions that he went to S4, he could only remember getting on the plane at McCarran International Airport and then getting off the plane to go home. During those 2 particular cases, he claims he couldn't remember what took place during the time he was actually at S4. This could mean that Lazar only had memory of actual hands-on experience working at S4 for a grand total of 1 day. In addition, Lazar states that he sought the assistance of a hypnotherapist named Lane Cack to help him recall additional details regarding his alleged experience at S4. This also included the most sensitive and potentially earth-shattering information, which was contained in the blue briefing folders. Therefore, we, the general public, are asked by Lazar to accept a significant portion of his claims regarding the most secret program in history, which were drawn out from memory by hypnosis. Folks, would you be willing to bet your life on vitally important information obtained in this manner? And here's the Jerry Friedman story, which we'll skip over. We've covered this before. Jerry Friedman was a historian. He was retracing the path of the original settlers. He walked all over that area that Bob Lazar claims the secret flying saucer alien base is at. It's just not there. And here's the bus, just like one that Lazar claims he rode into S4 from Area 51 proper. Lazar claims that only he, the bus driver, his boss, Dennis Mariani, and 1 security guard were on the bus, which took them to S4. Why was this bus essentially empty? How did the other 22 scientists allegedly working on the program get to the facility? Why didn't they all ride together as a group? And here's the alleged location of S4. It's a fugazi, friends. It's a fake. And I'm sorry, has anybody ever actually driven an old school bus? I don't think you can make it 15 miles through the desert on a dirt road in a school bus, but that's just me. These are some satellite photos of Papoose Lake. You can get those at the objectreport.blogspot.com. And Schratt goes on to say, despite Lazar's claim that the S4 facility was built into the sides of Papoose Mountain Range, no satellite imagery have ever shown any evidence that a significant facility is actually there. This includes the so-called gate near the entrance, as described in this report. How can this be explained? Satellite imagery taken in 2013 via Google Maps show no indication of an improved dirt road leading to the area where the S4 facility is alleged to exist. In addition, satellite imagery taken from previous years show absolutely no sign of a hangar complex where Lazar claims S4 is located. Multiple computer experts are unanimous that the satellite imagery covering the alleged S4 facility has not been tampered, altered, or pixelated in any way. Check it out for yourself. Now there's new claims that Google Earth is purposefully pixelating things to hide Bob Lazar's base. Bullshit, bullshit. All right, 1 second here. I'll check in with the Kick chat and your chat. No, we're all up to date. All right, we're going to keep going. And I get that this is dry, guys. We'll go back to the video if I can power through this. In a 1996 documentary titled Dreamland, Lazar made the following statement. On the first occasion when I drove out there, all the hangar doors were closed, but at close range, you could tell that the doors were wide open. We drove around the left side of the installation, and there was a main entrance in there, and we went through some gates and a security checkpoint inside. Now that's all changed. Typical government building. Note how Bob described how he had to pass through gates before entering the S4 facility. There's never been any evidence of gates. And by the way, they retconned this to explain for the discrepancy. Now he just walked around the side of the hill and there was just a door there. No gates, no road, no guard shack. That's all been retconned. More changes to the story. Here's a photo by Doc Searles. Area 51 is at the top. Papoose Dry Lake Bed is located in the center. So that's interesting. There's the dry lake bed. Flying over Area 51 and Papoose Dry Lake Bed dozens of times during the 1980s, both Colonel McKean and Colonel Don Emmons never reported seeing any top secret saucer base south of Area 51. Yeah, so they didn't see gates, they didn't see guard towers, they didn't see any of the things that Bob Lazar originally described. It's all a myth, folks. I think it's very important we consider the testimony of these heroes. They were flying all over that base. Never saw what Bob Lazar described. Restricted airspace only extends to the mid portion of Papoose Lake. If there really was an ultra top secret saucer base there, certainly the restricted airspace would extend far beyond the southern boundary of Papoose Dry Lake. If, according to Lazar, you are now not allowed to talk to anyone but your assigned partner or buddy, how did Lazar acquire the names of the other 22 scientists working on the program? The discrepancies just keep coming. And here's more proof that there's nothing at S4. Members of Greenpeace successfully held a demonstration directly on Papoose Lake and reported absolutely no sign of a secret installation. They didn't see any guard towers. They didn't see any gates. Nothing that Bob Lazar originally described. How could they have made it to the most top secret facility on Earth without being apprehended by security personnel? In 1986, Bob Lazar filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. In the file, Lazar states that his occupation was that of a self-employed photo processor. There is no mention in the paperwork that he ever worked at Los Alamos Labs. Why, after more than 25 years, has not even one of the alleged 22 scientists who work on the program at S4 ever come forward to validate Lazar's account? Lazar claims he was interviewed at EG&G facility at McCarran International Airport for the job at S4. However, while vacationing in Reno in 1985, Lazar became part owner in a brothel known as the Honeysuckle Ranch. Why wouldn't have this come up during his background check? March 19, 1987, Lazar bankruptcy decree was issued indicating that he owed multiple people in Nevada a total of $270,324. Would the U.S. government hire somebody who just went bankrupt to work on the most sensitive program in history? And again, he would never be given clearance to do that. And this is an article published in Focus confirming that Bob Lazar was convicted of pandering and his connection with Honeysuckle Ranch, which was an illegal whorehouse. Would the United States government hire someone to work on the most sensitive program in all of history who had such a sketchy background? And the rest of this I disagree with, because he's giving some vague arguments in support of Bob Lazar. Maybe Bob Lazar saw something, but maybe he didn't. And Bob Lazar talked about seeing the Aurora spacecraft. Well, it's really not a spacecraft. It's a next generation, I guess, space plane would be the way to describe it. It's the successor to the SR-71 Blackbird. And again, more letters from John Andrews. We have made it through. And I'm sorry for the length that it took to get there. But we'll go back to the video right at the moment, right? And that's a little bit easier to digest. I'll be checking in with the support. I'll be reading any remaining super chats, PayPal pledges, people buying me a coffee, anybody becoming a member, gifting subs, gifted YouTube memberships. We'll be calling all of those out. And we've got a little bit more to go through with this video that we found, which I think is excellent at displaying how much Bob Lazar lies. If Bob Lazar is telling the truth, why did he lie 5 times verifiably, lied 5 times in the very beginning of this interview? You know, I will, in fairness to him, you know, like if it was just his education that he lied about, but he didn't lie about his work history and he didn't lie about all the other stuff, I may be more inclined to believe him. But the lies keep stacking up, and we can see, courtesy of Michael Schratt, just a tremendous amount of inconsistencies in his stories. And the weight of the evidence against his story being real, it just adds up. And what does he have to prove his story? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely not a shred of evidence in 30 years. But don't let things like facts get in the way of a good alien story you can make money from, right? Let's continue through the video and wrap things up.
The being's height probably couldn't have exceeded 4 feet. That's tops, because when you walk into the craft, you're hunched all the way over. In fact, you have to.
Yeah, but a 4-foot alien can jump, I guess, to get in the hatch that's at 8 foot. You know, these are discrepancies that are important, that kind of prove by themselves that the story's just not true.
Practically crawling, but you're hunched all the way over until you come up to the center of the craft. So it's certainly nothing our size. You know, more probably half our size. 3.5 feet would be more realistic.
The seats are small.
Oh yeah.
And again, how big were the people, the aliens that drove this thing? 3.5 feet. Then he said 3.5 to 4 feet in a different interview. Now he's saying 4.5 feet. Well, which is it? 3.5, 4 feet, or 4.5 feet? Or are they 3.5 to 4.5 feet? I don't know.
Well, you've heard, here's another area that's always been strange. You've heard all about these abductions. Everybody's talking about they've been abducted. What is your opinion on the abduction stories?
Oh, alien abduction.
Personally, I don't believe them, but and again, that's something strange coming from me, you know, coming out with a flying saucer story, but I don't see enough evidence.
No, that came out after his story. That was
completely wrong, but
Dan
I just
Burrish.
have a hard time with most of them.
It was
and
a
if
fake.
in fact, you know, they did occur, there might be 1 or 2 that may have actually occurred, you know, with reference to Betty and Barney Hill.
There you go. Woo, aliens, puff, puff, pass. That is correct.
You know, there is some interesting, you know, evidence.
Blaine's
there,
escape quarter.
I don't know for sure. In my gut feeling,
Has been a member for 2 months, gets free super chat. In the movie that plays in Bob's head, all the evidence against him was planted by the government time travelers. Yeah, that is correct. Thank you for being a member. Blaine's escape quarter. Thank you for your continued support. Much, much appreciated. And here's a journalist, writer Albert Lanier, says, having been a journalist for over 20 years, I can tell you that if someone lies about their education, they are likely to lie about any other part of their life. Bob Lazar is exhibit A in this matter. Yeah, I agree. If you'll lie once, you'll lie about other stuff.
that I just don't buy it.
Okay. And as you said earlier, they may be just looking at us like we're some big Disney World, something interesting
Right.
to observe. And you said how long do you think they've been watching? Did I hear you say earlier you think over 1,000 years or more than that?
Oh, more than that. I mean, there's very interesting old paintings from the Renaissance period that have pictures of flying saucers drawn in the background in the sky. Obviously not a smudge, but obviously an elliptical shaped craft. And
Yeah, that's not proof you worked on flying
glow around it. I
saucers,
mean,
fake
some of these
scientist pimp.
are fascinating. So
It's just not proof.
whether or not that proves anything, I mean, there's certainly mention of them in some older texts too. So from the evidence that I've seen, it appears that they've been coming here for thousands of years.
You've never actually seen one of these beings.
No, I haven't.
Oh, that's a problem. He told John Lear that he saw an alien at S4, and that's a famous story. And then he kind of threw John Lear under the bus and said, well, I saw something. I didn't say it was an alien. It looked like it could have been a little mannequin or a child, which I don't understand why there'd be a child, but there were some scientists and I saw through the window. And either he lied to John Lear or he's lying in this interview. Either way, both of those things can't be true. Either he did see an alien and he told Huff and John Lear that he saw an alien at S4, or he's lying in the interview. I think that he realized that was a bit too far, and later he lied to try to clean that lie up.
Do you know have you ever heard of any underground facilities where they might be some of these beings?
Well, I've heard a lot of stories, and in fact, S4 is built into a mountain. The only thing, and the reason for that is to disguise it from satellite photographs.
Why don't they do that with all the hangars at Area 51 then?
The facility that
if they have that capability,
permitted to go into, but
wouldn't you want to hide the stealth aircraft in hangars like that?
Facilities where there's
Guess not.
Working side by side with humans, working on secret projects. I don't know if I believe those, and in fact, just because I have a negative opinion about it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. But I just have a hard time believing that.
Have you heard of any of these ships being in any other countries? Does anybody? Are we the only one? Is the United States the only one that has any of these craft?
Well, I've heard stories.
Yeah, total speculation. How, even if he did work on alien flying saucers, unless he worked on them in foreign countries, he wouldn't know who has alien flying saucers in the world besides the United States. So this is total speculation.
I don't really keep abreast of all the UFO information, but the one that caught my attention was there were sightings in Sweden, I believe, in the 70s and early 80s.
Yeah,
a farmer out there called Billy Meyer.
Yeah, that's the guy that you copied your craft from. We've shown that. And Billy Meyer was a complete and total hoaxer.
And the reason that caught my attention is the craft looks exactly like the one that I was working on. And he has some fantastic photographs of it. Now,
yeah, he faked all those photos, you moron.
People claim that
And by the way, Bob Lazar and Gene Huff got all those photos, the Billy Meyer photos, just a few months before Bob Lazar magically got a job at S4 working on, wouldn't you know it, the very same flying saucer that Billy Meyer took photographs of in Sweden. Or maybe they were inspired by those fake photos.
Photographs are phony and so on and so forth. However, they look fairly decent. And on top of that, it looks exactly like the craft that I worked on. So if it was a phony picture, the chances of them building a model that looked exactly like the actual craft are remote. So
unless you copied your sport model from Billy Meyer's beam ship, Bob Lazar, and you just happened to get those photos right before you worked at Area 51 on alien flying saucers, what a coincidence.
It is possible that craft was there, or we may have been testing it ourselves and taken it that far, though I doubt that, but that has caught my attention.
Has the government given you any problem about coming out and discussing this?
Initially, there was a big problem with that, and there were threats and so on and so forth.
All of his claims of being threatened, he literally said somebody shot at him while he was driving a car. And he didn't call the police. He didn't make any police report. I'm sorry, but if you're driving your car down the highway and somebody pulls out a gun and starts shooting at your car, there's going to be a police report. There's no police reports about any of his claims. None. Zero. And it is quite common that these guys always pretend, we've seen many people do it, that they're under some sort of Men in Black deep state attack. It's like a super duper prover maneuver. Like, my information must be real because the government's attacking me. But of all the people I've ever heard about Men in Black attacking them, intimidating them, trying to silence them, nobody ever has any actual proof or evidence of it. Not a film, not a photo, not a letter, not a recorded phone call, nothing. So I think this is just a plot device of a UFO story. I'm going to take a moment to recognize a kind and generous benefactor who is right now today the MVP of gifted memberships. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Truth Seekers gifted memberships. And Sam Corbin, you've given me an opportunity to give that pitch I always give. If you haven't already, friends, please do smash that subscribe button. It's a huge boost to our channel. And besides boosting our channel, you will also be eligible to win one of these gifted memberships for a free channel membership here. Get access to our members only section, which is usually $5 a month. You can also, if you don't win one, you could hit the join button. We'd appreciate that. We give you a big shout out and thank you. But big shout out and thank you to Sam Corbin, who has now expanded our Truth Seekers community here by 5 members. And if you have won a Truth Seekers gifted membership tonight, please do thank Sam Corbin. You'll see a little pop-up that says Sam Corbin gifted you a membership. Give him a big shout out and thank you in the live chat. And thank you, Sam Corbin, for your kindness, generosity, and support. Let's get some more gifted memberships and expand our community of fellow Truth Seekers here. And we've got Amber Gedden with one for the goal. Amber Gedden is also a YouTube channel member and a huge show supporter. She says, suffer lie azar, praise the cash. Yes, praise the cash, praise the cash. And thank you, Amber Gedden, for your kindness, generosity, and support of the show. It is much, much appreciated. Let's see if we can power through the rest of this. We've got about 15 minutes to go.
Over time.
And we're making excellent time, believe it or not.
In fact, for the first day, they broke into the news here in Las Vegas and aired it. It was pretty much a hands-off approach after that.
Bob, obviously, this is all top secret information.
Yeah, this is top secret information. But he was never prosecuted.
Did you have any problem with the government when this happened?
Well, initially, before it hit the news, there was a big problem. There were lots of threats and things of that sort.
And no proof of those threats.
Friends, I had a friend working at another facility on the test site, working with stealth fighters, and they pulled him out of work and interrogated him. And
what's his name?
Pretty much covered all.
Can we verify your story? He's never named that person. That's an anonymous source.
They broke into.
Oh yeah, my friend. They pulled him out off the stealth projects. What's his name? Everybody who worked on those stealth projects is known, or should be known.
The news one night in Las Vegas that it was a hands-off approach. After that, because really doing anything would really verify what I said was true, and it's pretty much been that way ever since.
And
that's a very good point. I've heard that before.
Insert disinformation in to discredit you. In
good point.
So people say, "Well, this is just Bob."
I have that book. I'm going to have to go through it again. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely.
Good point.
I mean, the disinformation is
scraped together by the 1976 David Gemini sci-fi novel Venus Development and visuals from Billy Meyer.
Was selling women in South America. I mean, any bizarre story you can think of has been attributed to me. Anything to discredit what I've said, and some of them are tremendously funny, and some of them have some.
Yeah, it's not hard to discredit you. You're a fake scientist, convicted pimp. You're not a real scientist. You ran a whorehouse. You discredit yourself with your lies and your fake education and your fake work history and your fake claims of being a scientist. You're not a scientist now. You never were.
Basis in fact, and they've just distorted it and changed it around, and it's really unbelievable. And for the most part,
pimping ain't easy.
On the internet, because there's no ramifications.
Pimping ain't easy, friends.
Anything on the internet, I can put up a web page that says Don Garlitz is a child molester, and you can't do a thing about it. So it's it's open season.
Nerd pimp, yeah.
drag racing is real expensive, especially top fuel racing. You know, it's up to $10,000 a run now with the
No, I didn't.
But what kind of budget do you think the military would have on a project like this?
Well, the budget would probably be phenomenal, and where the money.
Well, they got
comes
you to
from
work for only
is another big
$1,000,
question. It was
so
probably originally funneled through some of the Star Wars budget, but it's obviously it's labeled as a black project, which means it doesn't have any real accounting to
again,
it. It
they
just
were
absorbs
thinking
money
they
from
were
other
going to get
places
$1 million
without
Hollywood
any paper
film
trail.
deals,
But
and they
I
tried
imagine
like
the budget
hell,
is
and they
fairly
never
small.
did.
Where did they find the craft?
Do you know where this craft came from?
Seems like a lot of trouble to go through. You know, people will do an awful lot to
No, I
avoid
don't know if it was
having to
found,
work
given
for a
or
living.
dug up in a
And yeah,
hole
it's a long
somewhere. The
shot,
only
but
information that I had was just
he
a
tried to
little
cash
blurb
in
that
every
they
chance
gave
he
us
got.
that the
Never
craft
really
had
worked out for
originated
him.
in the Zeta 2 Reticuli star system. And,
I can say this for sure.
Anyway, so it obviously wasn't crashed.
I
No,
can
I
say
don't
this
believe
for
it.
sure. Bob claims he wasn't paid for either of those two documentaries. I don't believe that. Many people are saying that the money was funneled through his wife, like pay my wife to be in the film, but don't pay me or something like that. Something shady. And those guys won't release their books. So it's verifiably true that between the book and the two documentaries, millions of dollars have been made from Bob Lazar's stories. And there were several other documentaries in the early 90s on television and other outlets. And Bob Lazar sold his own version of, his explanation. I think that it can verifiably be proven that millions of dollars was generated from the Bob Lazar story. Now, how much of that he got for himself, I don't know. Not unless these less than credible, immoral, unethical so-called documentary filmmakers release the books, release all their financial information. How much money did they get for Netflix distribution, or how much money did they get from Orchard to distribute the Jeremy Corbell? I think it's safe to assume that millions of dollars have been made based on available evidence. How much of that Bob got, I couldn't tell you. Bob could tell you, but he won't, because he claims he never made any money from his story. There are several on the record interviews where he stated, I don't make any money from this. I never have. That is verifiably false.
It crashed. It was in perfect operating condition.
Did the people who you work for feel like that we had the capabilities of catching up with this technology?
Oh, absolutely. And that was part of the intent, was to, move
Recreate
our
it.
technology up to the stage and duplicate it. And that's what the big push was not just to duplicate it, but to duplicate it with materials that we had and were familiar with. And I only knew what happened up to 1989. It's coming up on 10 years now. Now, wherever the project is operating, we know it's not up.
It is,
near
yeah.
Area 51
Well, that's
anymore,
con man,
but,
confidence
they
man.
may
He's
have
got a lot of
already gone
confidence in his
pretty far.
lies.
We know they didn't stop on the work, don't we?
You got
He's
that.
still selling shit on his
What about
website
the
related
rifles?
to this.
Are
Yeah.
you familiar with that?
I've heard a lot about that, like everyone has. Watched some specials on television here and there. I don't have any inside information on it, but it certainly seems like something occurred there.
Well, over 300 people have come forward that claim they saw the craft or saw.
Yeah, I've heard that.
So, in our today's court of law, 3 people say they saw you kill somebody. You could go to the gas chamber.
Oh, right. I believe in court, it's an absolute win. I defy anyone to disprove it in court.
But he won't testify in front of
Don't
Congress.
have that opportunity.
Let's talk about, can he describe exactly how this gravity machine, he calls it the size of a basketball, functions or works? Let's get into the engineering.
Yes.
Bob, for the
Tell us how the
sake of
reactor
viewers out
works.
there that are technologically inclined, can you give us a kind of a brief overview of how that little small basketball reactor, how it could generate power and cause a gravitational field to form?
Yeah. George Knapp's been working UFO conventions
I'll
talking
give
about
a
Bob
brief
Lazar for
overview
30
of it.
years.
It can get fairly technical, but basically
Well, that
what
and
it is
Skinwalker Ranch
a reactor
fairy
and an
tales.
accelerator. The base plate of the device is something similar to a cyclotron, where the particles are sped up in a magnetic field and accelerate it to a high speed.
Why can't he duplicate the reactor then?
Is an element that we don't have here on Earth known as element 115.
Oh, you need the
Something that
magic
also
flying
can
saucer fuel.
synthesize in an accelerator. There are heavier elements that we do synthesize, like plutonium and things along those lines, and generally they have a half-life, which means they disintegrate very rapidly, and the higher you go up on the periodic chart, the faster these things disintegrate. However, we have always theorized that there's a little island somewhere around element 114, 115 that elements will become once again stable, like other elements are, like zinc and iron and things that we're more familiar with. Well, apparently this is the case. Whether this element occurs naturally somewhere else in the solar system, somewhere else in the galaxy, or it's synthesized is, again, speculation. However, this is the fuel that's used.
Yeah.
When this is bombarded with an accelerated proton from, the pseudo cyclotron on the bottom of the device, it transmutes itself. It produces element 116, which releases a form of radiation that we really haven't seen, an antimatter radiation.
This is all science fiction. The science doesn't work. Ask any physicist.
And though antimatter sounds something out of Star Trek, it's...
And by the way, Bob Lazar once claimed that they conducted every scientific test imaginable on the element 115. If that was the case, they would put it in a mass spectrometer, they would know its isotopic ratios, and Bob Lazar would be able to recreate it. He never has, and he never will, because the real element 115 has a decay life. It has a decay of milliseconds. In other words, they create it in, they create it in a particle accelerator, and it exists only for milliseconds before it is gone. Bob Lazar described a stable version of this that had all these magical properties. If he had conducted every scientific test imaginable, he'd be able to recreate it. He can't. He won't. He never has.
It's something that we do produce in small quantities in accelerators. It's a particle with a charge and a spin that's opposite of normal matter. The reason
it's kind of stupid.
is so interesting to us and has been so interesting in science fiction is that when antimatter reacts with matter, when antimatter contacts matter, it releases
0 to 400,
100%.
650
milliseconds
milliseconds
of that matter to energy with virtually nothing left.
It's
now,
basically
all other
plutonium.
fusion
Yeah,
reactions,
the
you
science
typically see an
fiction.
efficiency of about anywhere from 0.8% to about 8%. And you know how much energy those reactions.
Tony Toledo. Even if he pimped a million hose, I would still be skeptical of Bob Lazar's claims.
It interacts with the element. It produces this antimatter radiation. It's just
the stories are creative, but they don't work from a science perspective.
And this is reacted with a
pure science fiction.
Target. When they react, they produce a small explosion, a tremendous amount of heat. And how that heat is converted into electricity is a thermionic generator, which is something along the lines of a thermocouple. It's something that when it gets hot, as long as you put heat,
he must have made at least $30.
Electrical energy out. However, the devices.
Apparently, he was a very stingy pimp too. The horse said that he took more money from them than they made.
The Cassini probe had 70 some odd pounds of plutonium in it, and it used a thermionic generator, but ours aren't quite that efficient.
Bob's made up element 115 is a fantasy like the rest of his story. Exactly.
It's operating. That's just how the reactor produces a large amount of electrical energy. It also produces, because of the element 115, which happens to have a unique property, that this gravitational
yeah, this is kind of funny, the real news.
Perimeter of the atom. And again,
God bless Joe Rogan, but he just really wants to believe him.
In that there are some forces that are mislabeled.
And I don't know that Joe's ever seen any of my coverage or Michael Schratt's coverage or Alien Scientist coverage or
is amplified.
Any skeptical coverage on him. He might think differently if he saw the other side of the story that the documentary filmmakers he's talking to won't give him.
This is amplified and also transmitted essentially through pipes, through waveguides throughout the craft, and focused, amplified, and used for propulsion.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, it gets pretty hairy, but it is a fascinating technology.
This has got to be, Bob, the biggest story in the history of mankind. Why has the mainstream press stayed off of it completely? And you know how they love big stories.
Yeah, because a real journalist wouldn't run the story once they found out that the story came from a fake scientist convicted pimp who ran a whorehouse.
Well, they do, but it's a dangerous story. It's like reporting on Bigfoot because there's not a lot of evidence. Once you leave a project like that, you don't leave with drawings and descriptions. For the most part, they virtually erase your background, and I know that sounds like Mission Impossible, but even the places that I worked, the places that I was educated, deny that I was ever there.
Because you weren't there.
I mean, it's a far-reaching thing, and without proof, nobody wants to look like they have egg on their face, so you don't get mainstream anything to cover this until there's more evidence, there's more proof. And even if you got 2 or 3 scientists to come forward, that's still not enough. People want hard.
I'm going to put that in the
facts.
finished
They want
doc,
things
though.
they
Thank
can
you
touch,
for
things they
reminding
can
me.
verify.
Yeah, somebody
Because there's
described
secrecy
S4
involved,
before
even if that
Bob,
was
and it
about
was
to
in a
happen,
science fiction novel.
it would, it would be squashed by the government under the guise of national security. No, you can't air that special. No, you can't do this.
Duper's Delight
So
again.
so
La
forth.
Costa
So
Vampire.
I don't think it's
Yes.
going to come
La
out
Costa
until
Vampire.
they decide that they want it out.
Can the American people handle the truth?
I think so. The American people can handle a lot.
His
It
electric
may
bike
not be
ran
what
on
they
Element
wanna hear.
116.
It may
Yes.
interfere with a lot of their current beliefs, but we adjust to everything. We really do. I think they're really underrating us.
That probably goes
Exactly,
back to
Patty.
what we
Yeah.
said.
Absolutely.
The boy who cried aliens.
Looks like
Instead of wolves, they cry aliens. They're always wrong.
Oh, yeah, that's
It's always a bluff.
I want to ask him about what's in the room next door. It looks like a lab.
With there's been millions of sightings. My wife and I have seen a couple of things ourselves that were absolutely unexplainable. What do you think with all that sightings? There's just so few actual photographs, and most of them are blurry. Has that got something to do perhaps with the way the craft operates, or is it just the fact that when people
Yeah, this
take
is
it
why
on
you don't do
camera,
hard
the
drugs.
camera
Good point.
table? What's your opinion on that?
Well, there's 2 points you made. First of all, is
Yeah,
having
this guy's bashing
available.
Bigfoot.
Usually, a sighting is exactly what you say, a sighting. It's an event that happens. It's over. How many photographs do you have of car accidents? How many photographs have you seen of car accidents, other than at the drag strip, because we know something's going to happen? But just out on the road, you never have one.
No, that's true.
It's because the event happens and it's over. Now, the only reason you know about it or the news crew gets there because it stays there after it happened. But the actual accident, there are no photographs of because it's a fleeting event.
Well, now with phones, there are photographs and even videos of accidents. So his whole line of reasoning here is completely wrong.
Fleeting event. That's something that you don't see. And a lot of people harp on that saying, well, there's no photographs of them flying. Well, it happened for 2 seconds. What do you want from us? Even if you got
So a
camera.
last minute call for support. We'll be wrapping things up here shortly, both for tonight and for the week. And we appreciate all the support. But if you would like to support our show, now is the time to do it.
In your hand, who says you're going to be, looking at the thing? On top of that, because these crafts operate using a gravitational engine, the gravity itself distorts light and space and time, and all that stuff sounds again like science fiction and something that's difficult to believe. But we know that gravity bends light, bends space, and bends time. And because of that factor, there are, for instance, on the craft that I worked under, I was told that from certain vantage points underneath the craft, you can't see the craft. You can only see the sky above it because the light is bent around the craft. So there certainly could be.
There's that mention, but he didn't say he was under the craft.
And someone 20 or 30
but there's
feet
the
away
root
from
of
you
that
could be
lie
looking at
that
clear
would
blue sky
later
and not
become
see it.
part of the
It's
story.
just the way things happen.
Light bends around the craft, so you only see the sky.
Will broadcasting this interview get you or I in any trouble?
What was that? I missed it.
Will broadcasting this interview get you or I in any trouble?
I don't think so. It's been about, like I said, almost 10 years. And, this has been on the news and gone over a bunch of times. And I think it's pretty much staying where it is. I don't see any problems.
So nobody's going to be calling up ESPN saying, don't run that piece.
Well, if they do, it wouldn't really surprise me.
Grifters backing grifters.
Well, what's in the room next door here?
Oh, that's my lab in here. I do a lot of
lab
independent research. Or,
fake scientist has a fake lab. Nice.
Anything science related, physics related, along with computer modeling, anything along those lines.
You told me you were just you were designing or did the computer work on a rocket. car that's going to go 900 miles an hour?
Well, I have a friend, his name is Waldo Stakes, and him and a rocket engineer, Ken Mason,
Good point.
built this car.
Rover 2049.
I believe this
Thief
winter it's
assumes
gonna
most
start
other
running.
people
It's
are
called
thieves.
Sonic Wind, and it's slated to go over 900 miles on ice. I believe the ice speed record's only in 200 some odd miles an hour. So I ran a couple of simulations on my computer, and just to see how the thing would perform. But it should be very interesting to see that. It's a liquid oxygen LOX alcohol powered rocket, like the rocket booster off an Atlas.
What's
rocket.
next door, Bob? It's my lab. Yes, it's his meth lab. Oh, wrong one. I'm sorry. Caney Death Squad. What's next door? His lab. Yes, his meth lab. One for the gold from Caney Death Squad. Thank you for your kindness, generosity, and big support of the show. Longtime show supporter and YouTube channel member. And don't be shy, guys. Now's the time to join. Hit that join button, become a YouTube channel member. You get a big shout out and thank you if you do it during the live broadcasts. Otherwise, my thanks to all the people. Sam Corbin gifted a bunch of gifted memberships. So we have 5 new YouTube channel members today, thanks to Sam Corbin. And we thank everybody for the kick support as well. Let's finish up here. Just a few more minutes of this video to go.
Old.
And remember, we still have alien scientist Jeremy Rye's excellent debunk document that we're going to get through eventually. And my plan is, when I've exhausted all available information, we're going to cut this all, the best of it, into a 2-hour video, which will be sort of a documentary, Bob Lazar, the rest of the story, which is intended to give people the rest of the story that the scumbag dirtballs selling the documentary and making millions of dollars would never give you and have never given you. They can't give you the rest of the story because then you'll know the story is fake and you won't buy their shit documentaries, which are really just pro Bob Lazar, rah, propaganda pieces where they all but lick his asshole in both of those documentaries.
Rocket.
No critical questions, none of his, terrible history of lying, his criminal history, his wife's criminal history, his bankruptcy. They don't talk about any of the stuff that discredits him. Funny that.
It's from the 50s, but it's quite a machine.
I'd like to get you to look at my swamp rat 32 and 4 and see how it looks aerodynamic in here, because you've got a lot of experience in aerodynamics.
Yeah, to some extent.
And see if I was on the right track, and maybe give me some tips there.
Well, it couldn't hurt to run it through the computer.
Fair.
We'll do that. Well, Bob, it's been great talking with you, and
Element 115 brand meth.
all my fans, we really appreciate doing this interview. It's certainly been enlightening.
Well, it was my pleasure.
Yeah, I agree.
Tell what you can do. Tell us a little bit about in the briefing room, because you had that on your tape. Tell us a little bit what happened when you went into this room. Tell us about the briefing room and some of the things that happened in there.
There wasn't a whole lot. It was a small room. It was.
Some genius filmed this.
I was
Look at
essentially
this.
left with a bunch of briefings, 120 some odd. I no longer can even remember how many. And
Yeah, that
basically they
number.
just
How many
contained,
briefings changed
a small
with
overview
time
of
too?
each
Another discrepancy.
satellite project that was going on. So we all knew the existence of each other. We just didn't know specifically what they were doing.
Yeah.
Since it was a group that was dealing with the metal.
Grifting is just easy. Why work for a living?
Virtually every aspect of it. So again, it gave us just an overview of what was going on and the name of some of
It
the
was
projects.
this interview is from 1997
I'm
actually,
sure
so
they
it
had
wasn't a big
specific
deal in
information
1997
dealing
to
with
do
their
that.
project and just had a small overview of what our group was working on. So that's basically all it was just reading through a lot of that, and along with some of the other information that was apparently collected from the craft or information that they had learned in the past.
What can you tell us about any bodies of alien beings?
Well, there apparently were some somewhere. There were some autopsy pictures of a being. Now, I don't know if that had to do, if this was something that was just in the history of the project, or if it was something that was there, or it was something that had to relate, to this craft. But of the 2 photographs that I saw, there were only 2 there. It was a small being just showing the chest, and the chest was cut in a T fashion with the skin pulled back, and it was the thing had just one central organ, as if that looked. Have you ever seen a liver in the supermarket? Just kind of a brown, almost liquid-looking thing, but it had just one central
Yeah,
organ.
the
And
other
then
guy is a
next to the
smart
graft, you
guy,
had the
but
organ
he
vivisection.
wouldn't be the
It
first
seemed
smart
like all the
con artist,
organs
you
we
know?
normally had just grown
Smart
together.
guys
There was a
become
section
con
of it that
artists
apparently
just as
pumped
much as
blood. There's another
stupid people
section of it
do.
that
In
processed
fact, I
air,
think
and
a smart
it
guy
just
makes a
seemed,
better con
again, to
artist.
be
He's more
one
intelligent,
single
able to
organ
fool people
as
easier.
opposed to little separate units here and there. But it was, and again, there was no information with it. We were just given the information, knowing of the existence,
And
just in
here,
case any
music is playing
information
us out here.
might help us in determining, what our particular project did. For instance, we were working in the power and propulsion system. There was no reason for us to have a tour of the inside of the craft. However, maybe the placement of the reactor was important to its operation, so we did have to see where it was. We did have to see, some satellite things around what was going on.
All right, we made it through Bob Lazar's lost interview, friends. Yeah, a lot of people do. Friend of the show, go subscribe over to Alien Scientist. Also, you could just search YouTube for Michael Schratt, or I believe his YouTube channel is called The Blue Room. You could go subscribe to Michael Schratt as well. Both good resources for accurate, good information, as opposed to all the grifter channels that give you the fairy tales. So we've been through Michael Schratt's groundbreaking. If you're just joining us, tonight we have gone through Michael Schratt's groundbreaking, the Lazar Report document, which details a great deal of Bob Lazar's inconsistencies, some would say lies as well, and fake facts, fake science. There's just a treasure trove in that documentary of things that don't make sense if Bob Lazar was telling the truth. I think Michael Schratt did a great job on that. And next up in our filming, remember, we're trying to film to get all of this information that proves Bob Lazar is a fraud and a liar and a fake scientist and a convicted pimp and fake scientist, whatever. We're trying to get it all into one video, but I knew it was going to take some time to sort through all of it and get all of that sort of on the record so that then it can be cut up and put into a documentary. You see here, we've got Bob Lazar. He's holding up the weight of the UFO believers. And yes, that is the sport model there. So we'd like to put together a documentary that will be free on our channel here eventually. Bob Lazar, the rest of the story, because I think it's literally a crime, or it should be, that these documentary film producers, all of them, they only give you Bob's half of the story. They never explore all the inconsistencies, all the lies, all the proven fabrications, like his education, like claiming to be a scientist at Los Alamos. It all falls apart when you get the whole story. And that's all I've ever wanted. If somebody's going to say, I'm making a documentary about Bob Lazar, great. Where's the skeptic in your documentary that's going to point out all the lies? Oh, you didn't do that. You wouldn't do that. It's unfortunate, but somewhere along the line, these so-called documentary filmmakers figured out that you don't do that if you want to sell it. It's got to be a true story or it won't sell well. And what was it? Bob Kiviat, former producer of Unsolved Mysteries, and he did UFO's Greatest Evidence, and he did the Alien Autopsy Fox thing. He commented to me that when you used to take on a subject like this, you always put the skeptical side in as well and let people make up their own mind. But somewhere in the early 2000s, maybe 2010, he said, people stopped including skeptics because they knew that they would sell the project a lot easier if they just left out a few facts and details that were inconvenient to the story being true. And for me, I think that's sort of a crime. I think that's a completely and totally dishonest way of approaching any mysterious subject. If you're not willing to give people the whole story, then you shouldn't be making a documentary. Now, I'm sure I'll be accused of that. Why didn't you include any of the evidence that Bob may be telling the truth? Well, there's already 2 documentaries where people are claiming Bob is telling the truth. Let's make one where we show Bob is a complete and total fraud and a liar and a fake scientist, convicted pimp that was bankrupt at the time with a murderer wife who never could have gotten clearance to step foot on Area 51. Not in 8 days, not in 8 years. Let's do that. And we've got Candy Death Squad with one more for the goal, saying Michael Moore changed the game on documentaries. Yeah, I like Michael Moore. I'm sure I disagree with him on many, many things, but I think he does a good job on some of his documentaries. I don't know what he's been up to lately. Certainly had some big hit, huge documentaries, kind of fallen off of my radar and probably everybody else's, right? We'll take some comments and questions. Dave W.T. Swinton, I can't believe that interview is only at 108 views. Well, it's small. It's on multiple channels on YouTube. I gave the link to that guy because that's where I found it. Some people just have, 100 subscribers or whatever for whatever reason. I'm sure if somebody took that interview and recut it, maybe we'll do that and put it on our channel. It would get a lot more views, but I don't really think that's fair use either. Who knows who owns the right to that documentary? Us doing it with commentary is perfectly allowable and legal under fair use, however, regardless of who owns it, because we were educating the public and critiquing the video, talking about it with our live chat, and certainly with the commentary. This is a transformative work that no one would mistake for the original. Nobody really cared about UFOs in 1985 in any meaningful large amount. I beg to differ. You weren't there in 1989 then, because UFOs were huge around that time. Roswell just became a big thing in early 1980, I think, when the first Roswell books came out, and the Roswell craze was in full swing even up to 1989. There were several books, documentaries, a Hollywood movie. UFOs were a big deal. Maybe not as big as they are now, but yeah. Have I covered Kurt Metzger? No, I haven't. No. Producer is right. I had a written piece on a couple of years ago, and the show always had the believer and skeptic sides on various subjects. Yeah, they don't do that anymore. It's just the believer side. That's all you get now, right? Yeah, I think you just like to disagree with me. There were thousands of UFO fans, tens of thousands. All through the 1980s, there was UFO conventions with thousands of people attending them. But okay, you know better than me. I mean, how long have you been into the topic? If you weren't there in the 80s, you don't know. There was Stanton Friedman's book on Roswell, Don Schmidt's book on Roswell, Tom Carey, Kevin Randall's book on Roswell. There was the big craze, Communion. That was around that time frame. Communion was huge. It was a bestseller book. Everybody was talking about Communion and alien abductions around that time. There was a Hollywood movie about alien abductions, about the book Communion. And Whitley Strieber was huge at that point. So I think you just don't know the history, but you could look it up, right? And the Communion movie, let me see when that was released. The Communion movie was released November 10th, 1989, starring Christopher Walken. There was a movie starring Christopher Walken in November of 1989. So yes, UFOs and aliens were huge in the 80s. Anybody remember Close Encounters? Well, that was probably 1978, but still, certainly the interest in Close Encounters extended through the 80s. What about E.T., the biggest movie up until that point of all time about aliens was E.T., huge phenomenon. So to say nobody was interested in aliens or UFOs in the 1980s, that's just, I don't believe that's factually correct, but we can agree to disagree. All right, so I believe we've done our due diligence, not just for tonight, but for the week. I think I'm going to cut the week short, and I'm trying to finish this cabin at my in the Poconos, and unfortunately, I'm getting wrecked by the weather. So if I leave on Friday, it's going to rain all day and all night on Saturday, so I can't do anything. The cabin's outside, all the work is outside, and I got to do some at work. You can't do that in the rain. So I think I'm going to cut my week a little short and leave a day early so that I'll have all day Friday. Saturday, I can just get some rest while it rains outside and just have some cozy fun time in the cabin. Wait, that sounded dirty. I'll be by myself. I jokingly call it cozy cabin time. You know, I have a nice fire at the cabin. I have some delicious food and pajamas, and I rest and I catch up on my reading. I learned this trick from who is it? Geez, I don't even remember. I'm totally blanking. Bill Gates. Bill Gates has got this trick from him. If there's things you want to read, like a book, magazine, whatever, you put it in a pile. And then when you have time, you read the pile. So I do that at the cabin sometimes. Sometimes there's videos that I want to watch and take notes from for my own research purposes. I do that sometimes. So I think I'm going to be leaving a day earlier so that I have Friday and Sunday to work on the cabin and Saturday to work on show preps and catching up on my reading and things like that. Yeah, people have been hugely interested in UFOs and aliens since the Roswell story came out. I think the first book really cracking that was 78 or 79. I'd have to check. But it's certainly there was a bunch of Roswell books in the 80s because I got them and read them. Hundreds of books and periodicals are written before that on aliens and UFOs. There was a UFO magazine in the 1980s. So, yeah. All right. Look, here's where you're just wrong. How many millions of people went to see Communion in the movie theater? How many millions of people bought the Communion book? Like, man, some people are just stubborn. How many copies did Whitley Strieber sell of his Communion book? Let's just see. That's one book. Communion has sold more than 2 million copies. Okay. How many books were sold about Roswell in the 1980s? Gotta love these new AIs, They're not publicly tracked. The decade primary publication on the subject, the Roswell Incident, 1980, achieved significant commercial success and is credited with revitalizing interest in the case. Charles Bolitz and William Elmore, The Roswell Incident, sold nearly 20 million copies. So there's 22 million people in the 1980s buying books about aliens and UFOs. And you're saying that's a small number? 20 million, 22 million? And that's just 2 books. What about the Betty and Barney Hill case? There was a book about that. What about, other alien abductions? What about, what's his name? Travis Walton's case. That was another book that sold millions of copies. So I don't know if you think 22, 25 million people buying books about the subject is a small number or a tiny group. Okay, we'll agree to disagree, right? Yeah, who cares? Who cares about congressional hearings? Who cares? What did we get from congressional? Show me a piece of evidence that we got from congressional hearings. We didn't get any. We got no evidence from the congressional hearings. It's a farce. Those hearings are a farce. They've got grifters like George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell and Dave Grush and all these other grifters testifying that have no evidence. So who cares? And yes, there was congressional hearings about UFOs in the 1980s, I believe. Were there any congressional hearings? I could do this all night. I'm sorry, I just disagree with you. In the 1980s, about UFOs or aliens or Roswell. I think there was a hearing about Roswell in the 1980s. No, you're right. No public congressional hearings. 1994, there was a formal audit of the Roswell incident. But yes, in the 1980s, there was no congressional hearings. But I don't really think that that's a measure of public interest. If there was millions of people buying books, and again, if we add the millions of books that were sold, and then we add the millions of dollars made from movies like E.T., Close Encounters, and other movies like that, the Communion movie, you're talking about 100 million people put their money down for a subject that they were interested in, which is aliens and UFOs. I mean, I would say a conservative estimate could be 100 million people paid for either a book or a movie about aliens and UFOs in the 1980s. I don't think that's a small group of people. All right, well, we'll agree to disagree. Great. It's a measure of public interest that they hold farcical, retarded congressional hearings that get nowhere. What did you get from the congressional hearings? A bunch of grifters promoting their latest bullshit that they're selling? That's what people don't get about these congressional hearings. It's all a fucking theater for retarded people. Look, we're having congressional hearings. We're heading towards disclosure. And we get no evidence. So what good were the congressional hearings except for people to grift off of? Because right when they go do the congressional hearings, then all the grifters rush in. Podcast appearances, books, UFO conventions. It's all just theater. The congressional hearings are a farce. It doesn't matter that they're having congressional hearings. We didn't get anywhere. They're never going to get anywhere. And yes, I agree. Ambergeddon says the information became more available when the internet. Yeah, I was on the pre-internet, like BBSs and things like FidoNet, where you could log on with your 2400 baud modem, or if you were lucky, 57.6, and you could sit there and download GIF images of UFOs and text files that had like interviews with Bob Lazar transcribed from Art Bell and things like that. Yeah, Isaac Asimov was huge in the 80s. I know because I was a huge fan of Isaac Asimov and all of that stuff because I was very interested in robots. Well, friends, we've done our due diligence. I'll check in with the kick stream, all caught up. We'll check in quickly with the PayPal pledges. You can always send a PayPal to support the show to truthseekershow@gmail.com. And we appreciate those very much because we keep most of that. Same for the Buy Me a Coffees. We keep most of that. Some platforms take quite a lot. We want to thank Maria for a kind and generous $20 PayPal pledge. She sent $20 to truthseekershow@gmail.com. And she says, I'm not even sure who this quartering guy is, but this is funny. I hope you keep covering him. Yeah, we probably will, given the interest. And also just to support free speech, because I can't stand when some scumbag who thinks he's a big shot on YouTube calls a YouTube rep and gets people's channels deleted directly after he threatens to do so. And then, of course, denies it because he didn't do that, right? Then why did it happen? All right, so we've done our due diligence, my friends, at least for today and for this week. I haven't really prepared any replays, but I can. Let me know in the comments or in the live chat. Would you like to see some replays this weekend while I'm busy building a cabin? Because I can't be in two places at one time. Well, not really, but I can sort of, if I prepare some replays, which we might do. But for now, friends, that's all I got for you. So until next time, my name is Stephen Canby, and good night, and God bless all of you.
Dark corners of the night, secrets hidden from the light. Whispers turn to screams, shattering all your dreams. Eyes wide open now, truth you can't disavow. Echoes through the halls, crashing all your walls. Truth seekers, exposing the truth. Truth seekers, coming for you. Uncover the lies, open your eyes. Shadows try to hide, no place for them to